Chapter 973. Dean wasn't able to witness the nuclear explosion as he was sent to the freezer. His memory ended as the freezer slowly closed. His line of sight was plunged into endless darkness once again. Dean's heart was filled with sadness as his parents' faces appeared in his mind. His past life had passed in a hurry. Where was his future? A tingling sensation suddenly came from his forehead. Dean instinctively felt that he had regained control of his body. He was no longer in the previous unconscious state where his soul was wandering. He immediately opened his eyes and saw the first ray of light. In a trance, it was as if he had woken up from a deep sleep in the freezer. But the girl's face made him sober up. At the same time, he saw Burrow, who was waiting for him in front of the sickbed. "How is it?" Burrow looked at the girl, who released his hand and asked. The girl nodded slightly. "No problem." "That's good." Burrow heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "How is it? Is what he said true? Is he really someone who survived 300 years ago?" "Yes." The young lady's expression remained calm and indifferent. She nodded slightly. "Through the dreamscape, I flipped through his memories. He is someone from the old era, and when the calamity erupted, his parents sent him to the freezer that he spoke of. He had been in a deep slumber, and when he woke up, he was already in the current era. He woke up in a desolate divine wall, where his strength was generally low. From a poor commoner, he climbed to the position of a wall lord. Strictly speaking, it should be considered as usurpation. Right now, he has left the divine wall he was in and was preparing to head to the Empire. In the end, he was captured and sent to the Battle God Wall, participating in the previous battle. She summarized Dean's life in a few words. She didn't elaborate on the details, as she probably felt it was irrelevant. "So that's how it is." Burrow's eyes flashed. "It seems that the kid is tactful and didn't lie to me. Is the God's Wall far from here? Is the freezer still there?" "The God Wall is in the south, some distance from here. The freezer is still there, but it's out of energy. Even if we get it, we can't use it. With the technology we have, we can't produce the energy needed for the freezer," the girl said calmly. Boluo was a little regretful. "Whether or not it can be used is secondary. It's a pity that it's too far away. Otherwise, I could study it. If something were to happen in the future, perhaps I could use it as a life-saving item or plant a spark. When it appears several hundred years later, perhaps the world will have undergone some wonderful changes." The girl looked up at her father. "Dad, as long as your experiment is successful, you can certainly live for hundreds of years or even immortality. This thing is useless for you." Burrow smiled and said, "That's true, but this freezer can freeze a living person for hundreds of years and still maintain their vitality. The core technology inside is extraordinary. Perhaps it will be useful for my experiments. Should I move it?" The girl thought for a moment and asked, "It's too dangerous for you to go to the giant wall alone. Let's talk about it later. I'll wait until my experiment reaches a bottleneck. It won't be too late to think about it then. Tell me about what happened 300 years ago. At that time, the Earth seemed to be very beautiful. What happened that led to all these changes?" He was about 8 years old when he went to the freezer. Most of the time, he was locked up at home and school. He didn't know much. The girl slowly said, but from what he saw of the world at that time, it was similar to what was described in those ancient books. At that time, there were no such fierce monsters on Earth. The strongest monsters on land were the lions and tigers mentioned in the books, but these monsters were small in size, and ordinary hunters could easily kill them. "Really?" Boluo leisurely looked forward and said with a sigh, "What a beautiful world. Unfortunately, people are always lazy amidst such beauty. Is this considered cheap?" The girl didn't answer his sigh. She continued, "The world at that time was the same as what the ancient books said. The Earth was dominated by humans. We were the rulers of the planet. Although we didn't have any racial enemies, the countries of the world had civil wars to maintain population balance. Where there are people, there will be struggles. That's inevitable." Burrow faintly smiled. He seemed accustomed to this kind of thing. He was sleeping in the freezer. Was it because of the disaster? The girl nodded. "This disaster was the same as what you speculated in the past. It came from outer space. In the words of the old era, it was alien invasion. At that time, the human countries didn't have the ability to resist. In the end, they chose to detonate all the nuclear weapons hidden in their countries. They were destroyed together with the alien races. Only some people hiding in the underground shelters were left. No wonder we found so many remains in the ruins. What a pity. Beyond the lookout sighed and then frowned. So you're saying that the gap in the middle is still unknown? The girl nodded. Burrow sighed again. I was hoping to find the truth of the founding of the empire through his memory. It seems that this wall was created by the origami. He suddenly thought of something and asked the girl, were the invading alien races the origami? The girl shook her head. He was too young then. He didn't know much. He only saw the spaceships that carried the alien races. He never saw them with his own eyes. However, the alien race's ability was to infect humans and turn them into monsters. From this point, it doesn't seem like the origami. Also, the alien spaceship was similar to the one you brought us to before. Similar to that spaceship? Luo suddenly understood. So, the alien invaders were the Arctic bug and the flame bug. Strange. Aren't they natural enemies? Why did they come to Earth together to attack us? The girl thought for a while and said, maybe they worked together for a short time. Maybe. Burrow didn't deny it. He knew that the Frost Bug King had extremely high intelligence and wasn't inferior to humans. After asking about the old era, Burrow changed the topic to the origin of Dean's cold arm and how to restrain the origami gene in his body. The girl answered fluently and narrated Dean's experience. He accidentally obtained a magic mark of the Defiler. With the help of this magic mark's superior resistance to other magic marks of the same level, he directly absorbed the unpurified extreme cold soul crystal, causing the cold air to invade his right arm and freeze it. Originally, the freezing would have continued to spread throughout his body, but when the signs of freezing appeared, he burned his arm with flames and accidentally suppressed the cold air in his right arm. Therefore, unlike other infected people, it was not a full-body infection. Later, he became the Wall Master and left the Wall to go to the Empire. On the way, he met the survivors of the old era in the wilderness. It was a secret tribe. He met the origami that they worshipped. He was hungry, so he ate the flesh of the origami. It didn't take long for the flesh and blood of the origami to recover. It was about to invade his brain, but he strangled the flesh and blood of the origami. Later, the flesh and blood of the origami drilled into his cold arm and was frozen. Then it slowly became honest. That's it? Burrow was stunned as he heard the girl's story. The girl nodded. That's it. Burrow's face was strange, but he didn't doubt her. He turned to look at Dean. It's really ruthless to resist the origami by strangling the throat. I think his neck was almost broken at that time. Dean didn't say a word as he looked at him coldly. You're quite lucky to be able to control the origami without the help of any external equipment or medicine. It's a miracle. If it were anyone else, they would have been doomed to die the moment they ate the origami's flesh. Be on the lookout, praised. He then turned to the girl and asked, is there anything else? No. The girl shook her head. Chapter 974. What's wrong? Burrow noticed Dean's gaze and narrowed his eyes. Dean looked away and indifferently said, nothing. I just suddenly thought of her magic mark ability to peek into my memory. I don't know the effect of using it on the undead. Can awaken the memory of the undead. The suspicion in Burrow's heart faded away. Interesting idea. You are worthy of the people of the old era. Your thinking is more flexible than the idiots of this era. Unfortunately, although the ability can peek into the memories of the undead, it can't awaken the memories of the undead. To be precise, most of the well-preserved undead have complete consciousness except for those with incomplete brains. But they can't control their bodies. Memory is like a piece of data, and the body is just a carrier. They don't have the authority to control it. They can only be bystanders. Dean's pupil shrank. Do you mean that the undead still have memories, but they can't control their bodies? Yes. Burrow was in a good mood. He was happy to communicate with Dean, a human from 300 years ago. You can think of the undead as a machine. I remember there was a technology called camera in the old era. The undead is like a camera. It can take pictures of the scenery, but it is a dead thing, and we need to control it. For the undead, we are the ones who control the shutter of the camera. We're the virus in their bodies. Dean stared at him blankly. Suddenly, his heart was burning with hope, and his eyes were shining. He could not help but say, "So, as long as we find a way to cure the virus in their bodies, they can regain control of their bodies." Impossible. Burrow decisively interrupted Dean's fantasy. First, the virus can't be cured. There should be nothing more terrible than the undead virus in the world. I don't know if it should be classified as a germ or a toxin. In short, as far as I know, there's nothing that can drive the virus out of the corpses. There is no such super antibody. Second, even if it is cured, the undead without the virus is just a dead person. Their memory cells will gradually weaken and die. They can't be read. Dean was startled. He couldn't help but ask why. Boluo smiled faintly. "Haven't you heard of souls? I'm not talking about the unrealistic undead that the Magi and the Empire are talking about. I'm talking about the source of life. To put it simply, it's our consciousness, but it's more complicated than that. Perhaps it's a kind of natural energy in the universe, or perhaps it's a kind of life magnetic field. When life dies, this kind of energy dissipates along with it. As for memories, they're just data that exists in the brain. They're completely meaningless, just like gears. Although they can move, they've lost the most basic kinetic energy. In the end, they'll only rust and decay." "Soul," Dean murmured with a pale face. In just a few words, his mood climbed from hell to heaven, and then fell into a deeper hell, so deep that there was no hope. He thought he could find a way to cure the undead in the divine kingdom, but now it seemed that there was no answer he wanted there. Soul, what an ethereal and remote thing. It was so far away that no one dared to believe its existence, but at the same time, it was impossible to deny its existence. He had prepared for the worst. Even if he couldn't find a solution in the divine kingdom, he could borrow the more advanced technology in the divine kingdom and the knowledge from the superchip to find a way to cure Aisha. But Boluo's words were like a heavy punch to his heart. Even the most advanced knowledge from the old era recorded in the superchip couldn't reach the level of soul. Boluo seemed to know what Dean was thinking as he looked at Dean's ashen face. He chuckled and said in a playful tone, "It's not entirely impossible for you to cure the undead king. As long as you can survive my experiment, you can get a long lifespan and even reach the point of immortality. With such vitality and painstaking research, it's not impossible to find a way in hundreds or thousands of years. Of course, the premise is that you have to survive." Haha. Dean's quiet heart suddenly came back to life as he heard Boluo's joking words. Yes, the technology in the superchip couldn't reach it, but it didn't mean that there was no way. There was no end to technology. If he could learn the technology in the superchip and continue to develop it, then it's not impossible to find the existence of soul. He was excited again as he thought of this. He took several deep breaths. Boluo was surprised to see Dean's hope reignite. He didn't expect Dean to be so persistent in his beliefs. It was just a teasing sentence, but Dean took it seriously. He smiled in his heart. This wasn't a bad thing. At least a test subject filled with confidence and hope was better than a test subject with a dead heart and a crestfallen head. "Did you say that you can live forever after completing the experiment?" Dean calmed down again and couldn't help but look at Boluo. The topic of longevity had been around for thousands of years. It was the eternal pursuit of almost all life forms. However, there was a limit to the number of times a cell could divide. As the number of divisions increased, a person would gradually age, and their bodily functions would gradually weaken. If one wanted to live forever, they could only imagine it in theory, and it would be full of loopholes. Burrow slightly raised his chin, and a hint of enthusiasm and pride flashed in his eyes. "If the experiment is completed, although I can't say that I'll be immortal forever, it's very likely that I'll live for thousands of years or even tens of thousands of years. Of course, being killed by external forces doesn't count. However, at that time, no external forces can kill me unless the Earth is destroyed." Boluo's words were full of confidence. Dean thought of Boluo's previous goal of surpassing the king and becoming a god. He understood that Boluo wanted to become a legend and be immortal like a god. But was it possible? Well, you rest first. I have something to do. Burrow raised the automatic movement watch on his hand and looked at the time. His expression converged, and he recovered his indifferent attitude. As I said before, don't move and don't get out of bed. Otherwise, I don't mind cutting your beloved corpse king a few times to study it. He turned and left. The girl glanced at Dean and silently followed him. Chapter 975. After an unknown period of time, Dean felt that his body gradually regained consciousness. The burning pain also came from his abdomen, and his brain became a little swollen. It seemed that a lot of things were suddenly stuffed into his brain. He reluctantly raised his hand and rubbed his temples. He felt sore and swollen like a tire muscle. Could it be that after reviewing the entire memory, the amount of his memory had doubled? Dean's mouth twitched as he thought of something. He asked Zash, who was pretending to be asleep, "How long did I sleep?" Zash slightly opened his eyes. "What do you mean?" "She used her ability to read the time in my memory." "Oh, about half an hour or so." "Half an hour?" Dean was startled. Although he expected it wouldn't be too long, he didn't expect it to be so short. In just half an hour, he had seen his entire life. Suddenly, he thought of something. If Dana used her ability to read his memory, she could use the time gap to do other things. Wouldn't she have dozens or even hundreds of times more time to think than others? Although his mind had been following the memory, but he could still think about other things. If there was a complex problem that he couldn't figure out, then wouldn't he be able to think about it in that state? He suddenly felt that Dana's magic mark ability was simply terrifying. It could be used for auxiliary purposes to exaggerate. If he were to practice fighting in the memory space, he would probably become a fighting master in just a few days. Such an ability should belong to a top 5-star legendary monster. Is she really a dream breeder? Dean murmured as he thought of Burrow's words. His heart was full of desire. If he could get such an ability, then wouldn't he be able to read Aisha's memory? He could meet her in her memory and listen to her voice and smile. He slowly recovered his calmness. The most important thing at present was to escape from here. But how could he get out? He thought of the sturdiness of the underground base, Burrow's strength, and his own state. He fell into silence. Was the world 300 years ago really as clean and beautiful as the bard sang? Zaxby's voice echoed as Dean was lost in his thoughts. There was a bit of longing and curiosity in his voice. Dean glanced at him. "Do you still have the mood to think about this? Anyway, what else can I do?" Zaxby laughed at himself. Dean was silent. Zaxby looked at Dean. "If his experiment is successful, then you should be stronger than him." "Do we have a chance?" Dean shook his head. "If the experiment reaches that step, he will definitely have a way to subdue me. He won't be stupid enough to create a monster that he can't control. This is a mistake made by low-level alchemists." Zaxby's eyes darkened, and he smiled bitterly. "That's true." Dean frowned slightly. He felt that the pain in his abdomen was getting more and more intense. The numbness seemed to converge into a ball, like a worm with many feet crawling in his body. Wherever it passed, there was a slight feeling of needles. This feeling spread to his neck. Dean couldn't help but raise his hand to strangle his neck, but suddenly the needles quickly retreated and retracted back to his abdomen. Dean suddenly thought of the uranium ring on his neck. His mood was a bit complicated. He didn't expect that this thing could resist the erosion of origami. Squeak! At this time, the door of the laboratory was pushed open without warning. Dean saw Burrow's figure appear at the door. There were 3 figures standing behind him. All of them had the same face as Dana, but they were dressed differently. The scarlet-robed Dana was among them. The other Dana was the one who fed them food. The last one was wearing rough animal clothing. Her skin was slightly dry. It seemed that she often did physical work. Burrow's face looked very gloomy. Dean's heart skipped a beat. Did he make a mistake in the experiment? Just as he began to tense up uncontrollably, Burrow walked over and gestured to the white-robed Dana beside him. Dana nodded slightly and stepped forward to help Dean. "Come with me." "What's wrong?" Dean asked. The white-clothed Dana rolled her eyes and said, "You're still asking? It's all your idiot's fault for exposing us." Exposed? Dean was startled. He immediately felt relieved, but he didn't dare to show too much joy as he saw their faces were not very good. He wondered, how are we exposed? We didn't send a message to the war god's wall. We are all deserters. You can ask her if you don't believe me. She was referring to the scarlet-robed Dana. Of course I know you are deserters. Idiots. White-robed Dana said in disgust. The battle armors that the battle god wall distributed to you all are equipped with tracking devices and hidden pinhole cameras. All of your actions will be captured by the military system. To put it bluntly, they have long since considered the possibility of deserters. The reason why they didn't chase after you all is because they treat you, who think you are infallible, as chess pieces for them to scout ahead. This is much easier than training death warriors. Dean was stunned. There was a monitoring device on the armor. They had been silently monitored for a long time. He suddenly felt a chill in his heart. This was too ruthless. Wasn't this considered recycling trash? Don't dilly-dally. Get up. Dana pulled Dean up. Although Dean had regained consciousness, his body was still soft and powerless. He could only lie on Dana's body like a puddle of mud. Dana showed a more disgusted expression, but she didn't push him away. It seemed that she was afraid of hurting him and destroying Burrow's most important experiment. How did you know? Dean subconsciously asked as he was dragged to the other side of the laboratory. His thoughts were still stuck on the matter of exposure. The white-robed Dana snorted coldly and said disdainfully, "Of course it's because I'm smart enough to discover the secret on the armor. Fortunately, I discovered it early. Otherwise, the enemy might have snuck over quietly one day." Dean suddenly thought of Zaxi. His own armor had been discarded, but Jason's and Zaxi's armors were still on. After all, the quality of the armor was still good. Zaxi's armor was naturally stripped off during the experiment. Then Dana would study it and find out the secret inside. After connecting the dots, Dean calmed down. At this time, he saw that he had been taken to a corner of the laboratory by Dana. There was an instrument that looked like a frozen warehouse, but also like a metal coffin. He quickly asked, "What is this?" Chapter 976. Dean fell into the metal cabin. He felt that was very soft and comfortable. He didn't know where Burrow got it from. "Don't make a sound. Behave yourself." Dana put her hand on the cover of the metal cabin. She lowered her head and fiercely said to Dean. She swung her arm and closed the cabin door with a bang. Dean's eyes quickly swept over as the cabin door closed. He saw Burrow and scarlet-robed Dana moving the laboratory equipment. Are they going to move their position? Dean was startled, and his vision darkened. The sound outside seemed to be closed as the cabin door closed. It was dark and silent. Dean could only hear his own breathing and heartbeat in the narrow metal cabin. He thought of Dana's words. His heart was full of expectations. If the people from the God of War's wall saw Burrow through the monitoring system, would they recognize him? Would they send a large number of strong people to intercept him? The answer was obviously yes. This could be seen from how Burrow wanted to move as soon as he sensed the urgency of the matter. He was also afraid. Perhaps this was a chance for him to survive. He secretly prayed in his heart. He moved his body and put his ear to the metal cabin. Soon he heard a very slight collision sound. It seemed to be the sound of equipment being dismantled. There seemed to be friction on the ground. In addition, he faintly heard a miserable roar. The roar was somewhat familiar. Dean couldn't help but think of Zaxi, who was lying on the bed next to him. Was he resisting? No, he should be dead. The screams didn't continue. Dean guessed that Burrow didn't intend to take Zaxi along with him. He didn't want to leave Zaxi behind to be investigated by the pursuers. So he killed Zaxi. Dean sighed in his heart. At the same time, he was a bit glad. Fortunately, he was fine for the time being. It didn't take long for Dean to feel the metal cabin being lifted. His body also tilted. It seemed that he was being dragged. Dean's heart tightened as he thought of Aisha. Burrow had to abandon Zashite because of the emergency transfer. Would he abandon Aisha as well? He couldn't hold back anymore. He raised his fist and pounded the metal cabin. Bang! Bang! His fist struck the metal cabin, causing it to tremble slightly. The feeling of hauling suddenly disappeared. Dean felt the metal cabin was leveled, and he immediately stopped smashing. With a click, the cabin door opened, and the white-clothed Dana looked at him with a murderous expression. "Didn't I tell you not to make a sound and not to make a sound? Do you want me to cut off your arm?" Dean didn't care about her threat and hurriedly said, "You want to transfer, right? Can you take Aisha, the Corpse King, with you? As long as she's here, I promise to cooperate with all of your experiments." "Dream on," white-clothed Dana said without even thinking. "There are so many things to bring. Where would we have the strength to bring a Corpse King? You." Dean's eyes were as cold as a knife. He looked at her ferociously. "If you don't take her with you, I promise you won't get any benefits from me. You dare to threaten me?" Dana raised her eyebrows and raised her hand, ready to teach Dean a lesson. "Forget it." At this time, Boluo's cold voice came from not far away. "Bring her along. It doesn't matter if we lose one. Moreover, she does have some research value." White-clothed Dana heard his words, and the killing intent on her face disappeared. She nodded respectfully. "I know, Dad." After that, he glanced at Dean in the metal cabin and snorted. "I warn you, if you make any noise again, I will cripple your arm. I will forgive you this time." After that, he didn't wait for Dean to open his mouth and slam the door shut. Dean was relieved as he looked at the closed cabin door. Aisha should be fine with Burrow's words. Aisha should be fine. She should... He clenched his fists slightly. He wanted nothing more than to smash this metal cabin and rush out to kill all of them. However, his body was too weak. Even though he was filled with anger and killing intent, he could only lie there sullenly. After taking a few deep breaths, Dean gradually calmed down. He changed his posture and continued to listen to the metal cabin. The metal cabin was moved. In the shaking, Dean felt that the metal cabin seemed to be going upstairs. It didn't take long for the metal cabin to be put down again, and the surroundings returned to silence. He tried hard to listen, but couldn't hear the slightest sound. After an unknown period of time, he once again heard the rustling sounds of collision, as well as the indistinct sounds of conversation, but he couldn't hear them clearly. After about an hour or so, Dean suddenly felt the ground tremble gently. It seemed that the earth was shaking. Then he heard heavy thumping sounds coming from the ground outside the metal cabin. It seemed that a giant beast was trampling on the ground. It didn't take long for the thumping sound to stop. Dean felt the metal cabin was lifted, shook a bit, and then stopped. It seemed that it was placed on top of something. It was another long wait. In a trance, Dean suddenly felt that the metal cabin was shaking slightly, but he couldn't hear anything. However, he felt his body was weightless for a moment, as if he was flying. It was still quiet outside, but Dean could hear one or two roars from time to time. They were low and vigorous, which was not the sound that human vocal cords could make. Dean listened attentively, but the metal cabin's soundproofing effect was extremely strong. Even if he put his ear on the metal cabin, he could only hear some relatively loud sounds. When a beast roar came from a distance below him, combined with the vibration of the metal cabin, Dean guessed the situation outside. The migration seemed to have begun, and they were taking the air route. I don't know if the pursuers can find the traces left by him. I didn't hear the explosion before, so the underground base shouldn't have been destroyed. Dean's eyes flashed slightly, but he wasn't happy at all. With Burrow's cautiousness, the possibility of leaving the underground base was extremely low. Even if the base was empty, there would always be clues. If it was him, he would bury some means in the base to make the pursuers disappear together with the underground base. In the following time, the outside fell into a permanent silence. In addition to the occasional strange roars and bumps, Dean felt that he was moving, but no other sound could be heard. Slowly, Dean felt the hunger. It seemed that 4 or 5 hours had passed. His mood was complicated, sometimes resentful, sometimes disappointed, sometimes hopeful. He resented the fact that the white-robed Dana had deciphered the secrets of the battle armor so quickly, and was disappointed that the pursuers hadn't been able to find him even after so many days. He was hoping that the expert who had come would be evenly matched with Burrow. Only then would he be able to take advantage of the chaos and escape. As these thoughts intertwined with each other, his mood became more and more gloomy. This was because he knew that only a loser would have such messy thoughts. Only when one was forced to a dead end and had no way out would they blame others for their failure and entrust their salvation to others. While Dean was thinking, the metal cabin suddenly floated, as if it was falling at a very fast speed. Dean's thoughts scattered, and his heart was shocked. He grabbed the cavernous material inside the metal cabin. His heart was both nervous and excited. Did the pursuers come? Bang! Suddenly, a violent vibration sounded. Dean's body was jolted along with the metal cabin, and his head hit the cavernous body inside the cabin. The elasticity was too strong, and he almost twisted his neck. He moved his neck and immediately put his ear to the metal cabin to listen. Ka! The cabin cover suddenly opened. The light shone in. Dana was standing at the edge of the metal cabin, looking down at Dean. Dean was still listening to the outside. He felt a trace of embarrassment, but soon restored his indifferent look. He quickly glanced outside the cabin cover and saw a greenish-brown neck. It was like a giraffe, but the neck was much thicker and longer than a giraffe's neck. Dean immediately sat up and took the opportunity to look at the outside environment. In addition to the greenish-brown neck monster, there was a dense forest around. Sure enough, this was not the underground base. Dana saw Dean's hurried look, and her face showed more disgust. She kicked the metal cabin. What's it to look at? It's because of you that we have to continue to drift. Dean didn't pay attention to her. After seeing the surrounding wilderness and sparse forest environment, he immediately looked for Aisha's figure. He saw that the metal cabin he was sitting in was tied to the back of the greenish-brown behemoth. The behemoth body was incomparably huge. Just its slender neck alone was about 1 meter in diameter. Its back was wide and filled with all kinds of equipment in a laboratory. Most of these equipment were wrapped to prevent them from being damaged. Dean saw Dana in scarlet robe and another Dana in animal clothes on both sides of the monster's back. As for Dana, who was first captured and tortured by him, she was soaked in a glass-like container. Half of her body was still incomplete, but the lower part of her waist and abdomen had grown a lot, and the embryonic form of a thigh was faintly visible. Dean soon found Aisha's figure in a pile of miscellaneous instruments. Her body was tied up by ropes and wrapped around a relatively heavy instrument. She was still standing as straight as when they parted, motionless and expressionless. Dean was relieved to see that she was unharmed. It seemed that Burrow kept his promise. At this time, a low roar came from the side. Dean turned around and saw a giant monster standing in the sparse forest dozens of meters away. It looked like a lion with snow-white wings, but its abdomen had long, curved, jointed legs like that of a spider. At this moment, the giant monster was chewing something in its mouth, and blood was squeezed out from its teeth from time to time. On the back of this giant monster were a lot of instruments, and some of them were wrapped in animal skin, so he couldn't see what was inside. I didn't expect that such a fierce beast would be hidden in the underground base, and it has been domesticated. Dean secretly thought. Hey! At this time, Dana threw something to Dean. Dean raised his hand and caught it. It was a piece of fried and sealed meat. Hurry up and eat. We'll continue our journey after the big guys finish eating. Dana rolled her eyes and said impatiently. Dean didn't need her to say it. He knew to replenish his body with food. He asked while eating, "Where are we going? Are we drifting aimlessly? Why do you care?" Dana coldly snorted. Dean wasn't angry and continued. The experiment can't continue if we keep drifting aimlessly like this. Why don't we sneak back to the war god's wall and find a secluded place? After the experiment is completed, we can directly kill our way to the Empire. Isn't that better? Idiot. Dana's face was full of disdain. Do you think it's so easy to cross the war god's wall? If it's just a few of us, of course, we can sneak back. But with you and these things, how can we sneak back? Do you think the warriors on the war god's wall are cowardly and incompetent like you? Dean ate the meat in his hand and said lightly, "If I didn't run away, how could your father meet me? If he met me, how could he do the experiment?" Dana snorted and said, "You're only worth this much." "Same here," Dean indifferently said. Dana glared at him. "Do you want to ask for a beating?" Dean looked at her raised palm, and his eyes turned slightly cold. But in the end, he resisted and turned his head. He didn't talk to her again. It's almost time. Get ready to go. At this time, Bolo, who was sitting on the head of the green-brown neck beast, passed the message. He didn't look back, but looked into the distance and said, "Hurry up and try to reach the eastern continent by tonight." "Yes, Dad," Dana said respectfully. She pulled Dean's metal hatch cover with her small hand. The cover almost hit Dean's head. Chapter 9:77. Roar. With a low roar of the giant beast, it set sail again. Dean was lying in the metal cabin. Burroughs' words, "Eastern Continent," made his imagination run wild. It didn't take long for Dean to hear a chirping sound coming from afar. It was getting closer and closer, getting clearer and clearer. Even through the metal cabin, he could feel the noise. It seemed that thousands of birds and beasts were attacking in a flock. Dean was shocked. He felt that the metal cabin suddenly shook and tilted to one side. It seemed that the greenish-brown, long-necked giant carrying him and the cargo was turning at a very fast speed. Was it attacked? Dean was surprised and happy. He listened carefully for a moment, but didn't hear any sound. He was surprised. Was it not the pursuers? Soon, he thought of the Thunderbird in the sky of Shunluo Empire. And this greenish-brown giant beast happened to be flying high in the sky. Did it mean that there was a flock of birds similar to the Thunderbird that lived in the clouds? Thinking of this, he was nervous. He was not worried that Burrow would be defeated, which would lead to their annihilation. He was worried that Aisha, who was tied to the back of the greenish-brown long-necked giant, would be injured. The sound of the cry was getting louder and louder. The soundproofing of the metal cabin suddenly became a bit weak. Dean estimated that if he was outside, he might not be able to hear it clearly even if he shouted loudly. Through the distribution of the cry, Dean's mind emerged the picture of the greenish-brown, long-necked giant being surrounded by a group of ferocious birds and beasts. At this time, Dean heard the sound of birds chirping. There was a sharp and loud sound which seemed to be a command. There were also panicked bird cries. It was obvious that Burrow and the other Danas had made their move. Bang! Bang! Dean suddenly felt the metal cabin was hit. The cabin cover was slightly dented. He was shocked. He didn't expect the attack from outside to be so violent. Soon, the sound of the impact was replaced by screams. It didn't take long for the sound of the cry to be more intense. The metal cabin was hit from time to time, and the dents were very sharp. It seemed that it was hit by a sharp weapon. Crack! With another impact, the gap on the side of the metal cabin cover suddenly broke, and the buttons were bounced off. The cabin cover was blown out by the strong wind, and the light shone into the darkness for a moment. At the same time, the roar was 10 times stronger than before, piercing the eardrums. Dean felt like he was in the center of a tornado and couldn't hear anything. The first thing Dean saw was the overwhelming dark red giant birds and beasts completely surrounding them. The scorching sun at 3 o'clock in the afternoon was completely blocked by these birds and beasts. Whoosh! The sound of something piercing through the air could be heard. Dean hurriedly looked back and saw a huge bird with dark red feathers flying over with its sharp claws. This bird beast was nearly 5 meters tall, and its sharp claws could easily lift a person. Get lost! A white shadow flashed in front of Dean's eyes, and a snow-white gorilla-like upright monster flew out. Its body was nearly 3 meters tall, and it had 6 arms. It grabbed the bird beast's claws and wings and punched its head. Bang! The head exploded on the spot, and blood sprayed everywhere. Dean saw the gorilla monster covered with snow-white hair, and saw that its face was a bit like Dana's. He smelled the familiar smell, and immediately understood that it was Dana in white. Dean no longer looked at her, and his eyes searched for Aisha's previous position. He saw that she was still tied to the heavy cargo instrument, and her body was motionless. She turned a blind eye to the disaster in front of her. Dean was relieved to see that she was safe and sound, and then secretly took a breath. Once she was in danger, he would issue an order to let her save herself. Even if there was a chance, he would let her take him to escape together. Although Belle was not by his side, but he had already envisioned a similar desperate situation and preset a second way of command, whistling. However, what worried him was that the surrounding was so noisy. Could his whistle reach Aisha's ears? "You go first, I'll bring up the rear." Suddenly, a low, hoarse voice came, as if a demon had awakened from the abyss, full of unspeakable gloom and horror. Dean followed the voice and saw a figure with curved horns on its head and 12 black wings on its back soar into the sky. Its body was nearly 3 meters tall, and its skin was dark and green, but it still maintained the appearance of a human, and it looked very much like the posture of a fallen angel in the myths. Dean's pupils shrank. What kind of magic mark is this? The next moment, the demonized 12-winged burrow rushed into the surrounding flock of dark red birds. Its towering figure was like a black scythe, and with a light swing, 7 or 8 dark red feathered birds were beheaded from the neck, and the cut surface was incomparably smooth. Dean saw that Burrow was holding a black giant sword in his hand. The sword was very wide, like the big sword used by the shield warriors in the Hunter Mercenary Corps. This is demi-demonization. Dean was shocked to see this scene. These dark red feathered birds were extremely fast, no less than a dominator. But in front of Burrow, they were like static dolls, and he could do whatever he wanted. He rushed into the flock of birds like a black blade, and all the birds along the way exploded. When the surrounding birds were cleared, the greenish-brown, long-necked behemoth immediately let out a low howl, like a sob or a roar, and turned around, flying to the other side where the flock of birds was sparse. Dean glanced at the greenish-brown, long-necked behemoth's head, and his pupils suddenly shrank, and he almost bit his tongue. On the head of this behemoth, there was a human face with clear facial features. However, the skin of this face was the same as the greenish-brown skin on its neck, extremely rough, with many small lumps, but the facial features were undoubtedly that of a human's. "Lower your head." Suddenly, a loud shout came. Dean's heart trembled, and he quickly shrank his head and climbed into the metal cabin. He saw a shadow pass over his head, and at the same time, he felt a faint burning sensation. This bird was actually emitting an extremely high temperature. Dean secretly thought that it was a close call, and turned to look, only to see Dinah, whose whole body was covered in snow-white fur like a snow ape, flying over. In a few strides, she grabbed and tore apart another bird that was attacking Dean, and blood rained down. On the other side of the greenish-brown, long-necked behemoth, a blood-red spider-like figure was fighting with the birds that escaped the net. There were black patterns on its body, and its movements were agile. The spider's legs bounced, and it easily pierced through the birds like a few sharp spears. In the rear, 12-winged burrow blocked the flock of birds, its black wings shooting feathers from time to time, piercing the eyes or neck of the birds that crossed the line. Some were seriously injured, and some were killed on the spot. After retreating for 4 or 5 minutes, the flock of birds was still chasing relentlessly, and hundreds of them were killed or injured. At this time, a high-pitched sound suddenly came from the chirping of birds, and then he suddenly felt that the surrounding birds were quickly reduced, and they all retreated. Ready to go, Dean's eyes moved slightly, and he was both relieved and a little regretful. But soon, Dean felt that the situation was not right. The birds slowly gathered, forming a large dark cloud behind him. To be precise, it was a dark red cloud, as if blood was seeping out of the cloud. Dean suddenly felt that the surrounding temperature was a little hot, and it was getting hotter and hotter. In less than half a minute, he felt that the temperature had risen to the point that his skin was burning. His face changed slightly, and he saw that the flock of birds had changed dramatically. If it was still dark red before, then now it was already crimson. The feathers of each bird had become incomparably bright, and the remaining black had faded, becoming bright red like blood. Whoosh! When one of the wings of one of the birds was ignited, it was as if a fuse had been lit, and all the wings of the birds continued to emit flames. This flame extended more and more, wrapping the entire bird. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a firebird, and the entire flock of birds had also turned into a sea of fire. Chapter 978. Dad! Dana, who looked like a snow ape, couldn't help but shout, her face full of anxiety. In front of the sea of flames, the black 12-winged burrow was like an Azura from hell. He held a black greatsword, his back facing everyone. Dean couldn't help but hold his breath. Was this the calmness of a king? In a short period of brewing, the temperature in the air reached a boiling point. The air seemed to be slightly distorted, and his clothes felt like they were burning. Dean even suspected that as long as a match was lit, the air would spontaneously ignite. With a sudden high-pitched cry, all the firebirds immediately cried in response. At the same time, the flames on the firebird's body surged, condensing into a blazing fireball in front of its chest. When the fireball reached 0.5 meters in diameter, it shot out with a loud bang. Thousands of fireballs flew forward, converging into one, like a torrential waterfall of fire, sweeping down from the sky. The momentum was magnificent and shocking. Suddenly, dark ripples appeared all over 12-winged Burrow's body. It looked like the halo of a character in a game. The instant the sea of fire engulfed him, he let out a low roar. Like a lion or a tiger, his momentum was intimidating. He raised his greatsword high and charged into the sea of fire. The sea of fire instantly drowned him and swallowed him. But in the next moment, the sea of fire quickly separated to two sides, and a black figure emerged. It was Burrow. He and the giant sword in his hand were like a reef beside the waves, standing upright in midair. The sea of fire was split apart by the giant's sword, but it didn't hurt his body at all. Even the feathers on his wings didn't burn. Dean's eyes widened as he was stunned. This wasn't an ordinary flame. He could feel the high temperature emitted by it. The temperature was much higher than the average fire. If it was him, he wouldn't be able to resist it. Even if the blade of the splitter was 10 times or 100 times sharper, it would be instantly swallowed and melted by the flame. There wouldn't be any residue left. At this time, the flame star remnant that had split off swept towards the greenish-brown, long-necked, human-faced giant beast. The giant beast let out a low roar and flapped its wings to create a hurricane, causing the flame star remnant to drift elsewhere. At the same time, it turned around at an extreme speed and flew towards the vast sky in the distance. Dean looked at Burrow, who was getting farther and farther away, and saw the dark fluctuations surrounding his body. He suddenly thought of the supplicant magic mark ability he saw not long ago. One of the abilities was to attach dark energy to attacks. This dark energy was the official name given by the Monster Atlas. In fact, it was the biological energy brought by the magic mark to the human body, just like the liquid flame created by Aisha after her transformation. Clearly, the dark ripples from 12-winged BOLO were of similar energy. Coupled with the image of a fallen angel, it was most likely a top-notch 5-star legendary magic mark. Soon, the greenish-brown long-necked behemoth left the battlefield with Dean and others on its back. The strong heat surrounding them was also sucked away by the gale and gradually cooled down. Dean turned his head and looked. He could only see a crimson cloud in the sky, but he couldn't see Burrow's figure. Soon, the green-brown long-necked behemoth landed on the edge of a lake in the forest. There were 2 lizard-like monsters lying on the side of the lake. Their bodies were more than 10 meters long. When they saw the intruders, they immediately climbed up from their comfortable leisure state. Their amber eyes revealed a cruel and bloodthirsty luster. They quickly crawled towards the behemoth, one on the left and one on the right. Umph! With a cold snort, the white ape-like Dinah jumped down from the giant beast and stepped on the head of a lizard-like monster that was flying over. With a bang, her relatively small body smashed the monster's head deep into the ground like a huge rock. The monster's brain splattered all over the ground, and the monster's brain was smashed deep into the ground. The monster's brain splattered everywhere. As for the other one, it was picked up by the behemoth's long neck and bit down on its head. The mouth of the human face opened, revealing extremely long and jagged fangs. It crushed the head of the demon and raised its neck to eat it. Dean's scalp tingled. He didn't know whether it was a human or a beast that controlled the behemoth's consciousness. After eating the lizard-like monster, the giant beast bent its neck and stretched its neck into the lake to drink water. The three Danas removed their demonic forms one after another. The Dana in rough beast clothes jumped onto the top of a tall tree and looked into the distance. It didn't take long for her to shout in joy, "Dad is back!" The white-clothed Dana clearly heaved a sigh of relief when she heard this, whereas the scarlet-red-clothed Dana seemed to be comparatively calm and didn't reveal any emotions on her face. Dean turned his head and saw Burrow's figure slowly flying back. He was surprised when he saw Burrow's figure. Previously, he was like a demon, but at the moment he was in a sorry state. There were many burn marks on his body, for the 12 wings on his back were torn by claws. They were bloody, and the feathers were messy. "Dad, you're hurt." The white-robed Dinah was surprised and immediately rushed over. Burrow slowly landed. The wings on his body quickly retracted. His dark skin gradually faded and became a bit pale. His upper body was naked, and there were several bloody claw marks on his back. "It's nothing. It's just a small injury." Burrow comforted the anxious white-robed Dinah. The white-robed Dinah's eyes were full of tears when she saw the injury on his back. She immediately ran back and took out the first aid medicine from a small box. Burrow went back to the back of the beast and sat down. He glanced at Dean. He was relieved to see that Dean was safe. He said to the other two Danas, "Let's take a break. The flame bird won't chase us." "Yes, Dad." The two Dinah nodded. Dean looked at Burrow, who was sitting down to rest. He curiously asked, "Are these flame birds the same as the Thunderbirds in the Empire? Are they military air defense weapons?" Dana, who was applying the hemostatic medicine to Burrow, glared at him when she heard Dean's question. "Do you know about the Thunderbirds?" Burrow didn't get angry. He looked at Dean. "You can understand it that way." Dean was surprised. When he heard Baluo mention the Eastern continent, he thought that there might be other survivors gathering places. It might be a second empire. Otherwise, Baluo wouldn't have gone to the Eastern continent. Now it seemed that the possibility was true. Could it be that it was another colossus like the Shenluo Empire? "Are there people living in the East continent?" Dean asked directly. He wasn't afraid of angering Burrow. Burrow nodded. "Of course." Dean noticed that he said, "Of course." Could it be that in addition to the Eastern continent, there were survivors from outside the Empire? "Why didn't you go there before? With your strength, you should be able to easily mix to a high position there." Dean looked at him, guessing that he might have something difficult to say, or that there was something there that could threaten him. "Why do you talk so much?" The white-robed Dinah scolded. Dean didn't look at her, as if he didn't hear her. He just stared at Burrow. His attitude made the white-robed Dinah even more annoyed. She was about to step forward, but was stopped by Burrow. "The situation in the East Continent is more complicated than you think. You will know when you get there, but you won't have the opportunity to see it," Burrow casually said. He took out the mechanical pocket watch and looked at the time. "I won't be able to make it tonight. Let's find a place to rest for the time being." The white-robed Dinah put the medicine bottle back into the box. She immediately came over and completely removed the metal door. She took out tools from another metal box to repair it. Dudian knew that she wanted to fix it as soon as possible. He glanced at her and turned to look at Burrow. "Your previous magic mark should be a top legendary magic mark. It seems that your body hasn't completely mutated." Burrow put on new clothes and said indifferently while tidying up his sleeves, "If you can survive, I will also implant this magic mark in you. By the way, the name of this magic mark is very cool. It is called Dark Angel." "Dark Angel?" Dean was surprised. "It doesn't have the word swordsman?" "Swordsman?" Burrow smiled. "Only the monsters that were given names later on would have the word swordsman. Most of the monsters that were given names at the beginning had their own names, but this Dark Angel has long gone extinct, and there won't be a second one, so there won't be any records of it in the Monster Encyclopedia. Of course, the magic marks of the kings won't be recorded in the Monster Atlas. It's a top secret, so that's how it is." Dean understood. Burrow tidied up his clothes and went to check the goods on the giant beast. After a moment, he came back and waved his hand. "Let's go." The white-robed Dinah had repaired the metal cabin. She seemed to be extremely good at mechanical things. She connected the lid and closed Dean inside. They took off again and hurried on their journey. It didn't take long for them to stop. When the hatch opened, Dean found that the sky was already dark. It was about the evening. The wind was blowing, and he suddenly saw a vast black sea in front of him. Dean was surprised. The eastern continent was on the other side of the sea. He had speculated that the Shenluo Empire was in the Russian area. If they were going to cross the sea, then the eastern continent was in the west. He was surprised as he looked at the Black Sea. The tides rolled up and hit the surface of the sea. The sea was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. There were countless secrets and murderous intentions. "Let's rest here." Burrow's voice came. Dean's mood was complex. The eastern continent is on the other side of the sea. Why don't we go there directly? "It's not safe to cross the sea at night," Burrow replied and turned his head, no longer paying attention to him. Dean wanted to ask again, but the white-robed Dinah came over with a piece of barbecue. She glared at him and slightly raised her hand, meaning to say that she would beat him if he talked too much. Dean immediately shut up. After all, a wise man doesn't fight when the odds are against him. He raised his hand to take the barbecue from the white-robed Dinah. He pulled slightly, but found that her hand was still holding the barbecue. It seemed that she didn't want to give it to him. Dean's face was cold. He was about to open his mouth, but his pupils shrank. He saw that the white-robed Dinah still had a fierce expression on her face. Her mouth moved slightly as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. There was a trace of surprise on her face when she realized that her throat didn't make any sound. Then the surprised expression froze permanently. A circle of dark red marks appeared on her snow-white neck. Then her head slowly slid down like she was skating on ice. Chapter 979. Plop. Dana's head and severed hand fell from the back of the giant beast and rolled down. Dean was completely stunned by the sudden change and couldn't react. The next moment, he suddenly felt a bone-piercing chill coming from his back, as if a wave of cold air was quickly climbing from his spine to the back of his neck. It was so cold that he could not help but shiver. Then, he heard an indifferent and strangely charming voice coming from the sky behind him. "Night Demon King, I trust you've been well since we last met." Dean's body stiffened. He felt as if there was an extremely terrifying demon standing behind him. He didn't dare to look back or even move. At this time, Dana's headless body also fell and rolled down from the giant beast. Dean also saw Burrow, who was standing on the long neck of the giant beast behind her. The latter's expression was particularly gloomy, and his black star-like eyes exuded a strong, killing intent. "Long time no see, Night Devil King. Don't you recognize your old friends?" An enchanting and charming voice floated into Dean's ears. It was as if a pair of soft red lips were exhaling in his ears. It made his heart throb, and there was an inexplicable excitement. It was a physiological reaction. Horrified, he barely twisted his neck and looked behind him. It seemed as if the whole world had collapsed. Boundless darkness pressed down on him, causing his vision to fall into a temporary darkness. He was actually unable to see anything. After a while, his vision gradually recovered, and he saw 3 figures standing high up in the sky. There were 2 men and 1 woman. The man had an imposing figure, and his entire body was shrouded in darkness, making it impossible to see his figure clearly. The woman had a graceful figure, and she was wearing an emerald green dress. There were no shoes on her feet, and her snow-white bare feet were exposed. She exuded endless temptation. "This is the king." Feeling the strange and chilling fear, Dean immediately thought of the identity of the 3 people. He felt as if the blood in his body had solidified, and his thinking became slow. "Bloodthorn, Moon Devil, Red Eye. Is it just the 3 of you?" Burrow's low voice sounded. His eyes were cold, and his burly body seemed to have grown a bit stronger. "Just the 3 of us are enough to bring you back." The previous indifferent voice came from one of the men. His whole body was shrouded in darkness, so Dean couldn't see him clearly. But the outline of his armor was very eye-catching. It was like a sharp blade protruding from his body. It reminded Dean of the Splitter. It seemed that this man was extremely good at attacking. Dean had recovered from the strange shock. His eyes were calm as he looked at the 3 of them. He suddenly remembered that Felicia had said that she was under the command of the Blood Thorn King. It's been so many years. I didn't expect you to run out of the borders. No wonder I couldn't find you anywhere in the Empire. The enchanting woman's voice had an irresistible charm. Her voice alone made Dean's heart palpitate. He even gave birth to a feeling of love. He wanted to kneel under her bare feet and serve her. Dean woke up from the strange feeling after she finished speaking. He was shocked. Even the origami, who had an impeccable appearance, couldn't make his heart beat and desire. But this woman's voice alone made him have such an impulse. Was this the ability of her magic marks? When Baluo heard their words, he sneered softly and said, "If that fellow light came, I would have a headache. But if the three of you dare to come and die, aren't you looking down on me too much? Oh, after so many years, your tone is still so arrogant." The man in the armor said indifferently, "If it was the former night devil, we would be helpless. But now you have betrayed God. I alone am enough to take you down. Is that so?" Baluo's expression was calm, a hint of mockery on his lips. He looked at him indifferently. "You could try. How can you not let me participate in such a thing?" Suddenly, as if she had discovered something, she giggled in a slightly exaggerated manner and said, "Isn't this Dana? There are actually two of them. Oh, it should be three. One of them was accidentally injured by me just now. Hee hee, after so many years, you still haven't forgotten her? Are you planning to resurrect her?" Baluo's face turned cold, his eyes surging with monstrous killing intent. His bones began to crackle as his body grew taller and taller. His pale skin that hadn't seen the sun for many years began to be covered in a dark green mucus. At the same time, the back of his shirt rose up, tearing apart. Pure black wings extended out, 12 wings in total. He was like a demon king descending upon the world. Huh. The enchanting woman was surprised to see Burrow's demonic body. "You can still keep the 12 wings of the dark angel after stripping off the king? Tonight, you will bury her." Baluo's voice became deep and sinister. The horns on his head bent, and black patterns extended to his face like a strange curse. His eyes became pure black without the scara. Feeling the pressure exuding from Baluo, the enchanting woman slowly put away the smile on her face. The three of them solemnly looked at him, their eyes flashing with deep killing intent as well as some strange emotion, like greed. Dean's body tensed up as he saw the momentum of both sides getting stronger. He hoped that their battle wouldn't affect him. Whoosh! Baluo suddenly shot out like a black scythe, cutting through the sky toward the three of them. The three of them dispersed and appeared in 3 different directions. The only one who didn't move was the man in the armor. The blades on his armor suddenly changed and seemed to come alive. They extended and twisted. In the blink of an eye, the size of the blades increased by several times. It was a bit like Dean's splitter, but it was more ferocious and violent than Splitter. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several blades shot out from his sphere as fast as phantoms. 12-winged Burrow swung the black greatsword in his hand and cut off all the blades. His body approached infinitely. At this moment, he suddenly stopped as if there was a wall in front of him. Dean noticed that the bodies of the enchanting woman and the silent man started to change dramatically. The enchanting woman's body began to swell. Her slender arms and thighs began to swell rapidly. They were like fat intestines that had been soaked in water, becoming extremely disgusting and bloated. Her body also grew larger, and she no longer looked like a human. She had turned into a lump of interwoven intestines, and in the middle of this lump, there was a blood-red pupil with a diameter of 0.5 meter. It was like a blood-red moon, emitting a strange demonic aura. The other silent man's body also turned into a 4 to 5 meter tall giant in the blink of an eye. His body was still in human form, but it was different from a human's. He held a weapon that looked like a Buddhist staff in his hand, and the tip of the weapon was a crescent moon. Seeing the changes of the three, Dean thought of the title of king that Burrow had mentioned. He quickly compared them to each other. 3 kings. Dean clenched his fists and resisted the fear. He carefully climbed out of the metal cabin. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to escape. However, as soon as he climbed out of the metal cabin, Dean saw Dinah in beast suit in front of him. "Go back." Dinah looked at Dean coldly. Dean didn't expect that she would pay attention to him at this time. He was so angry that he wanted to curse. He gritted his teeth and said, "Aren't you going to help your father?" Dinah still maintained her cold expression and repeated, "Go back." Dean slightly gritted his teeth. He glanced at Aisha behind her and finally resisted the idea of letting her make a move. With Aisha's strength, she might not be a match for the two Dinahs. Damn it! He was angry in his heart, but he still slowly moved back. Puff! Suddenly, blood flashed in front of him. Dinah's expression showed a trace of astonishment. Then her head fell down. Behind her severed neck, there was a head just like her, scarlet-robed Dinah. Dean was stunned. The scarlet-robed Dinah, who was almost the same height as Dinah, kicked the headless body of Dinah. She stepped forward and grabbed Dean's shoulder. She whispered, "Follow me if you don't want to die." Then she turned and jumped from the other side of the giant beast. She whistled at the same time as she jumped. Dean's heart was cold when he heard the whistle, but he quickly reacted. This woman had looked through his memory. Naturally, she knew all the commands that he used to control Aisha. As he thought, Aisha, who was tied to the cargo, suddenly came back to life. She cut off the steel rope on her body and quickly caught up with scarlet-robed Dinah. Dean was relieved when he saw Aisha following him. He was about to ask where Dinah was taking him, but when he turned his head, he saw that Dinah's expression was particularly dignified. She was concentrating on running forward. Obviously, she had no time to pay attention to his question. He simply closed his mouth. He heard a violent bombardment coming from above. He looked up and saw that 12-winged burrow was already fighting with the ball-shaped blood thorn king. On the other side, the giant moon king with the crescent moon staff had also joined the battle. The enchanting woman, whose body seemed to be intertwined with intestines, was only watching from afar. But the giant bloody eye in the center of her body was suffused with a strange red light, as if blood was about to seep out. In a 1 versus 3 situation, 12-winged burrow fell into a disadvantage in the blink of an eye. 2 of his wings were cut in half. The Bloodthorn King, who was fighting him head-on, did not suffer much injury. Every time 12-winged burrow's sword was about to cut his body, it would suddenly stop, as if there was an invisible barrier. Is this the ability of a king? The more Dean watched, the more shocked he became. The speed of the battle was too much for his eyes to take in, and the strange attacks that appeared from time to time were completely incomprehensible to him. Seeing that Burrow was surrounded by 3 people and had no time to be distracted, Dean was relieved. He could not help but feel a little excited. At this time, Scarlet-robed Dinah had already carried him more than 10 miles away, leaving the battlefield behind in the blink of an eye. Dean suddenly noticed that Scarlet-robed Dinah was running in the direction of the bottomless sea. He was shocked and hurriedly said, "You're crazy. This is a dead end." Even Burrow did not dare to cross the sea at night, but Scarlet-robed Dinah was running straight over at this moment without looking back. Dinah ignored Dean's shout and looked straight ahead. She was extremely focused, which also meant that she was very nervous. Looking at the fast-approaching sea, her body suddenly began to change. Bright silver scales appeared on her arm that was clamping Dean's arm. They were extremely smooth, like fish scales. Her cheeks also had wavy cracks, like gills of fish. Seeing her changes, Dean suddenly thought that she was the same as Dinah, having 2 kinds of magic marks. Could it be that her second magic mark was a sea monster? Soon, Dinah proved Dean's guess with facts. She grabbed Aisha, who was following behind, and with the other hand clamped Dean. She suddenly jumped from the shore. She leaped down. Plop! Cold seawater suddenly wrapped his body. Dean almost choked. The next moment, he saw an incomparably ferocious, strange mouth open, and the mouth was incomparably black. His pupils shrank, and he hurriedly raised his hand to resist, but his magic mark ability was suppressed. As soon as he raised his arm, it was swallowed. The sharp teeth scratched his arm, and then he felt that he had entered a very tight space. His body was firmly wrapped, and he was unable to move and could only barely breathe. I was swallowed as soon as I entered the water. Dean was somewhat desperate in his heart. His luck was unbelievably bad. He tried to struggle, but his arms and feet were firmly pressed, and he could not move at all. Fortunately, he felt that he could continue to breathe. After a flurry of struggle, Dean quickly calmed down and suddenly found that he did not continue to slide deeper, and there was no sticky stomach acid around him. He could not even feel the burning sensation of digestion, and he could still breathe oxygen. About 4 or 5 minutes later, he felt a force pushing on the top of his head, and the soft flesh wall around him was also pushing. Whoosh! He felt that he was being squeezed out. He sat down and felt that he was sitting on something sticky like a mass of meat. The surrounding was filled with an unpleasant pungent smell. He tried to open his eyes wide, but he could not see anything. At this time, he realized how important the dark vision was. "Don't move." When Dean was at a loss, a cold voice with a bit of breath sounded. Dean immediately recognized that this was the voice of scarlet-robed Dinah. "Where are we?" Dean immediately asked. "In the stomach of an underwater monster." Scarlet-robed Dinah gasped. Although Dean had some guesses, his heart was still cold, but soon he calmed down and said, "Do we have a way out? Why did you come to the sea? Aren't we looking for death? Do you have any way to escape?" Chapter 980. Dean knew that what she said was right, but can you survive in the sea? Dean looked at the darkness in front of him. Although he couldn't see Dana, he could feel her breath. He knew that she was in front of him. Since she had chosen this path, it showed that she had some assurance. "If there is no accident, I should be able to survive," Dana whispered. Dean's heart shivered. He didn't expect her to have such an ability. He gently sniffed and smelled Aisha's scent. His heart was a little relaxed. He knew that she wouldn't leave him halfway when they entered the sea. His heart was somewhat grateful. However, she knew that he should have a purpose for bringing her along. "Can we get out of the belly of the sea monster?" Dean asked. Dana said in a low voice, "I can't. If we go out now, there will be other sea monsters outside. We will be torn apart. This is my temporary shelter." "Shelter?" Dean's heart moved. "Did you intend to let this monster swallow us?" "Yes. Why did you betray your father?" Dean looked at the darkness in front of him. He knew that Dana could see his expression, so he didn't hide his suspicion. The air fell into a brief silence. After a few minutes, Dana's voice sounded again with a bit of a mocking tone. "Father? From your human point of view, he gave birth to us. He is indeed our father. But you have seen that in his eyes, we are just tools for his experiment. Do you know what he calls me?" "What?" Dean was surprised. Wasn't she called Dana? Dana seemed to see Dean's expression. She chuckled with a bit of sarcasm. "We have 2 names. One is Dana. This is the name he uses when there is no one around him. But when there are other Danas, he will use another name to distinguish us. For example, my name is number 67. "Number 67? Dean was startled. His pupils shrank. "Is that the serial number he used to train you?" "Birth." Dana's lips twitched when she heard this word. "That's a good description. It's indeed a birth. In fact, I'm not the last one to be born. There are many more after me. However, as you can see, there aren't many who are still alive. The other Danas all died in his hands and became his experimental subjects." Dean felt a burst of palpitations and inexplicable sighs, although he had expected it. Earlier, when Burrow picked up the tortured Dinah, that gentle movement and extremely gentle gaze made him feel as if he was looking at himself. Anyone would think that he was a loving father, but who could have expected that he had personally buried so many of his beloved Dinah? Perhaps you don't know how it feels to personally send the dissected and buried Dana into the furnace. For me, they are me, and I am them. Dana's voice was a bit sad. She didn't have the arrogance of a queen like before. Instead, she made people feel pity for her. I was lucky. I was lucky enough to survive." Dean was silent for a moment. "He named you Dana. This name should be very important to him, right? What's the use? We are not the real Danas. We are just experimental products. A substitute. A puppet to comfort his lonely heart. Nothing more." Dana sneered. Dean thought of Dana, who was infected with the virus, and Burrow's indifferent attitude towards her. He knew that Dana was right. These clones were just experimental products made by Burrow. It was a sad existence. The other two seemed to be loyal to him. Dean suddenly thought of Dana, who had tried to kill him several times before. Her loyalty to Burrow was obvious, and it didn't seem like she was pretending. Of course, Dana's tone suddenly became indifferent. He wouldn't dare to keep us around if we weren't loyal enough. There was one who was ready to betray him and escape from the Devil's Cave, but he was aware of it in time. So, you hit it very well, Dean said in a relaxed tone. Dana didn't reply and didn't say anything. The darkness fell into silence again. Dean felt that the surrounding flesh wall was slightly squeezing and shaking. It seemed that the sea monster was swimming at a very fast speed. He couldn't help but ask, "Are we going to stay in its stomach? What if it runs into the deep sea?" "No," Dana indifferently said. Dean heard her confident tone and was stunned. "Why?" "Because I'm controlling it." Dean was stunned by Dana's answer. He was about to say something when he thought of Dana's magic mark ability. She was able to read memories. The premise of reading memories was obviously that she needed to connect to his brain. Could it be that she could also connect to the brain of the monster? Thinking of this, he suddenly felt that this ability was really too awesome. Why didn't he have such good luck to meet such a powerful legendary monster? Otherwise, he felt that his life would be much easier. He could have unified Sylvia and even reach the Shenluo Empire in advance by relying on the correct route to read the magic mark. He could have relied on this ability to mix into the level of the Lord of the Abyss and spy on countless Empire secrets. Dean's thoughts continued to drift for a while. With a violent jolt around him, he came back to his senses. "What's wrong?" Dana didn't speak. It seemed that he was the only one left in the darkness. Fortunately, the faint snorting sound told him that Dana was still there. After a few minutes, Dean felt that the twisting flesh wall around him became loose again. At this time, he heard Dana's voice. "We just met a hunting monster and almost had an accident. Fortunately, we were lucky enough to meet a powerful sea monster when we entered the sea." Dean was relieved and then smiled bitterly. "It should be considered bad luck, right? We were swallowed as soon as we entered the sea. What kind of monster was it? Was it killed?" As soon as he finished asking, he heard Dana's angry voice. "It was me, idiot. Dean, it's my second demonic body." Dana rolled her eyes and explained. Dean came to his senses. He thought of the changes in Dana's body before she entered the sea. It seemed that she swallowed him to provide him with oxygen while hiding her smell. There was a trace of strange expression on his face as he thought of the hideous mouth that was still fresh in his memory. How big was the demonic body to be able to swallow him? "Since you have this demonic body, why didn't Burrow let you enter the sea to control a monster and take us to travel at night?" Dean thought of another thing and immediately asked. After a while, he heard Dana's indifferent tone. "It's my secret. He doesn't know about it." "Secret?" Dean was even more surprised. "Didn't he implant your magic marks into your body?" Dana didn't answer Dean. Apparently, she didn't want to tell this secret to Dean. Dean was puzzled. He felt that with Burrow's cautious personality, Dana's hidden rebellious heart couldn't be detected because her acting skills were high enough. But it was a bit inconceivable that she could hide the secret of her body. "Why did you take us with you?" Dean changed the question. After a moment of silence, Dana opened her mouth again. Her words made Dean's whole body cold. "Probably because we are almost the same." "Almost? What almost?" Dean's body was unnaturally stiff. Dana's voice came slowly. "I've seen all your memories. You're just like me. We're all orphans. Hee, if there's a chance, I really want to show this world that if it can abandon me, I can destroy it." Dean was startled. There was some complex feelings in his heart. It was Burrow who abandoned you. It has nothing to do with the world. "No." Dana's voice was sonorous and decisive. "He is just a part of this dirty world. It is the world that made him dirtier. One day, I will personally purify the world." Dean slightly opened his mouth, but couldn't speak. He didn't expect that her mind was hiding such extreme thoughts. It was like she was possessed. She got evil from one person and then turned to hate the whole world. Don't you hate the world? Dana seemed to see through Dean's thoughts. Her tone was somewhat cold. I know that although you don't say it, but you are the same person as me. You really like the old era of your childhood. That clean and beautiful world is not the world you grew up in after you woke up. So you learned to kill people. The more you kill, the more you kill. But your heart doesn't feel guilty. For you, they're like animals from another world. You can't even call them the same kind. There is no mercy in people's heart when they hunt the aliens. So for this world, you are the real devil. Dean was startled. After a moment, he slowly shook his head. What you said is wrong. Wrong? Dana's voice was cold, and there was a trace of displeasure. Dean didn't show any fear. I never thought about killing people at first, but I felt the threat of death. When I felt that people wanted to kill me, and could even kill me without paying much price, I really woke up. The first time I killed someone was an old alchemist. It was a mistake. It was at that time that I experienced the feeling of killing. A lot of things are like this. When you start it, you can't stop it. In particular, more and more people made me feel that they should be killed. Even killing them is not enough as a punishment. It's a pity that death is the most severe punishment. Haven't you ever hated? Dana asked coldly. Her tone was full of disbelief. Dean knew that she wouldn't believe him even if he denied it. But he didn't want to deny it. I hated when I was in the most desperate situation. But that desperate attitude wasn't permanent. When I got rid of that mentality, I didn't hate anymore. I knew who my enemy was and who I should kill. Dana sneered. Stupid. Dean wasn't angry. He felt that after saying these words, his mind became pure, as if it had been baptized. He recognized his goals and his beliefs more clearly. But there was always a worry in his heart like a heart disease. Maybe one day, when I am completely desperate, maybe I will really become like you, wanting to destroy everything. There was a bit of confusion in his eyes as he muttered to himself. Dana slightly sneered, but didn't say anything. After a long silence, Dean heard a roar coming from outside. His heart shivered, and the next moment, he felt his body being slammed against the meat wall on the other side. Damn it! Dana cursed in a low voice. At this time, Dean felt the soft meat wall around him became as hard as a steel plate. His body shook left and right, as if the sea monster's body was swimming forward at high speed. Bang! Bang! The sound of impact came from time to time. The sea monster's body twisted and turned crazily, and Dean's body followed it. After 10 minutes, the battle outside was over, and peace was restored again. Dean was relieved to see the sea monster was still alive. He said to Dana, "Can it hold on until the shore?" The previous battle was so fierce that it was estimated that the sea monster had suffered a lot of injuries. "It depends on luck," Dana replied. Dean was slightly silent. In this boundless sea, there were countless monsters. It really depended on luck. This world is really terrible. He sighed softly in his heart, thinking that if they were unlucky and this sea monster was torn apart by an even more terrifying monster, they would inevitably be buried in the stomach of the fish. Perhaps that would be the end for him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel regret. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, "Is there any monster over the sea? Why can't we fly over at night?" Dana snorted and said, "Do you know what is on the other side of the sea? Isn't it the eastern continent?" Dean, of course, remembered. "Then do you know what is in the eastern continent?" "What?" "Another empire." Dana's words made Dean's heart jump. His previous guess was once again confirmed. There were survivors in the eastern continent. An empire like the Shenluo Empire? Dean couldn't help but ask. Otherwise, why is it called an empire? Dana asked. Dean choked and then asked, "But what does it have to do with not being able to fly over the sea at night?" "Idiot," Dana snappily said. "There are thunderbirds over the Shenluo Empire. Naturally, there are defenses over the eastern continent's empires. They are the flame birds we met before. These flame birds live in the clouds, and it is said that they feed on sunlight. So we can't fly too high, or it is easy to alarm them. If we fly too low, it will attract the attention of some of the terrible monsters in the sea. These monsters live in the deep sea. Some of them have extremely poor eyesight and are almost blind. Some of them have very good eyesight and have adapted to the dark environment of the deep sea. Those monsters with extremely poor eyesight will turn a blind eye to the monsters swimming in the sea, but will regard the flying monsters as prey. Chapter 981. I've been here before. Of course I know. Dean couldn't refute Dana's words. He suddenly felt that he had asked a stupid question. Since Burrow knew about the East Continent, then naturally he had been there. The first time we passed through this place, we were almost attacked by a flying sea monster. To the Eastern Continent, this sea area is like a sea defense line around the continent. We can only cross it during the day or ride the Eastern Continent's invisible airship. Dana explained to Dean, but it's very risky to cross during the day. Although the sunlight can avoid the attack of sea monsters, but the flame birds are active during the day. Occasionally, they will hunt other flying creatures at low altitude. Dean was curious about the invisible airship she mentioned. It seemed that the level of technology of the East Continent wasn't weaker than that of the Shenluo Empire. Why did you come back to this desolate place? Dean asked. He didn't believe that Burrow couldn't find a place to hide in the East Continent. This desolate place is close to the War God's Wall. It's convenient for us to observe the situation there. Dana said indifferently, moreover, living in the Eastern Continent isn't as comfortable as you imagine it to be, especially for him. When he first came to the Eastern Continent, he accidentally exposed his identity and raised the alarm of the Eastern Continent. If he were to be exposed again in the Eastern Continent, the consequences would be extremely dangerous. Dadian was startled, but soon understood. The East Continent Empire wasn't a big secret for the kings of the Shenluo Empire. But the East Continent Empire could stand tall and didn't fall. It was obvious that there was a king-level existence. At this time, Dean felt the sea monster's body shake again. His body also tilted. It was a bit like riding a roller coaster. He didn't communicate with Dana again so as not to distract her. After half an hour, the sea monster that had experienced several battles gradually slowed down. Dean clearly felt the feeling of swaying lighten. It didn't take long for Dana to speak. We're here. Get ready to go ashore. Dean's heart relaxed. At this time, he suddenly saw a glimmer of light shining from above. With the help of the glimmer, Dean was barely able to see a strange shadow standing in front of him. It looked like a giant spider. He was scared, but soon he remembered that it was Dana's demonic form. He saw her legs piercing into the surrounding flesh wall. It seemed that she was one with the sea monster. It was like a tumor growing on it. Let's go, Dana shouted. Dean's eyes swept to the side and saw another beautiful figure standing there. He immediately grabbed her hand and jumped to the passage where the light came from. It was only a few meters, but he quickly jumped up. The sound of waves came from all around, and the smell of seawater and humidity filled the air. Dean saw himself standing on the back of a dark fish, and behind him was the dark sea, boundless and daunting. A few hundred meters ahead was a shallow beach. The sea monster's body was too thick, so it was impossible for him to swim into the shallow waters. He did not know if it was because of the dark sky, but the water in the shallows still looked very dark. He could see the rugged reefs protruding out. He did not dare to jump into the water and swim over. Although it was shallows, there were many small sea monsters in it, including some poisonous sea monsters. He wanted to spread his wings and fly over, but he suddenly remembered that his magic mark ability was still suppressed and eliminated. He could only turn his eyes to Aisha and whistle. Aisha quickly entered the demonic state. Dean hugged her body and let her fly over with him. After he flew up, the sea monster suddenly growled and issued a low howl like a manatee with a bit of pain. The next moment, a black shadow flew out from the passage in the middle of the back of the fish. The body changed in midair, and the bat-like wings spread out from the back. It chased at an extremely fast speed. Dean looked at Dana, who was chasing him. His eyes flashed slightly. This was a rare opportunity to escape. He had just thought about it, but soon it was cold again. Now he wanted to escape, and the only thing he could rely on was Aisha. But Dana knew all of Aisha's orders. He was afraid that Dana would react and use the order to restrict Aisha and capture him before he ordered Aisha to attack or escape. Wait, Dean said in his heart. There would always be opportunities. At this time, Aisha landed on the sofa with him. Dana also landed and put away the demonic state. Dean also let Aisha return to her human appearance. He looked at the distance outside the sofa. There were sparse giant trees, and there seemed to be a plain in the distance. Where are we going now? Dean asked. Dana looked around and frowned. After a moment, she looked at Dean and said, "Let her enter the demonic body and take us away. We don't need to leave any traces." Dean frowned slightly. Although a bit uncomfortable, he knew that she was right. He let Aisha enter the demonic body again and hugged her from the side. At this time, Dana also hugged him from the other side. Dean was startled. "Can't you fly? I have to save my physical strength." Dana glanced at him. Although her expression was indifferent, but there was a trace of exhaustion between her eyebrows. Dean thought that she must have consumed a lot of physical and mental strength to control the huge sea monster, so he didn't say anything. "Go that way." Dana pointed. Dean let Aisha fly in the direction of her finger. In the blink of an eye, they flew for more than 2 hours. The scenery along the way was monotonous and boring. Most of them were plains and rolling hills. Occasionally, there were forests. "Wait!" Dana suddenly shouted. "Quickly land." Dean was surprised and immediately let Aisha land. "Restrain your breath. There are fire dragons," Dana whispered. Dean's face slightly changed. He shrank his pores to hide the smell and whispered, "Are these fire dragons monsters from the Empire of the East Continent? How could they appear in the desolate land across the sea? Can they fly? Who told you that they are monsters?" Dana stared at the distance and said without looking back. Dean was startled. "What is that?" Dana glanced at him but didn't answer. After a moment, Dean also saw a faint red light in the distance. In the blink of an eye, it ran along the straight line and disappeared from his field of vision. Dana stood up and patted the dust on her sleeves. "Let's go." Aisha took off again with Dean and Dana. They flew in a crooked curve in the direction pointed by Dana. Along the way, there were wastelands and groups of monsters. Dean found that the strength of the monsters here was generally not high. There were countless monsters along the way, but the strongest one was barely at the level of the abyss. It was safer than the wastelands that had been cleaned up in the Shenluo Empire. Chapter 982. Dean looked up and saw a magnificent building in front of the vast wasteland. It looked like an ancient city wall. It was made of huge stones that were 3 or 4 meters in diameter. It was 200 or 300 meters high. It was particularly spectacular. However, Dean wasn't shocked to see such a city wall after seeing the 1,000-meter-high giant wall. He asked Dana, "Didn't the Empire of the Eastern Continent build a giant wall like the War God's Wall?" "Of course, but we would have been exposed by the time you see it." Dana let out a soft laugh and said, "The sea region we came from is equivalent to the Eastern Continent's first line of defense. The Shenluo Empire's army has no way to pass through that line of defense. Their battle god wall is built in the inland region, while we are only at the periphery. This is just a shelter built by the refugees who were chased out." "Refugee shelter?" Dean was surprised as he looked at the huge wall that was getting closer and closer. He suddenly thought of the barbarians that were expelled from the outer wall. Perhaps this was the same existence. Moreover, this huge wall was obviously built by manpower. It wasn't like the giant wall, which was natural and didn't have any traces of piling up. "Did you come here with Burrow?" Dean asked. Dana glanced at him. "Of course not. There are many refugee shelters outside the War God's Wall in the Eastern Continent. This is just one of them. We came from other shelters. How can I go to the same shelter? Wouldn't it be suicidal? In case he didn't die, he would be the first to catch up with us." "Many?" Dean's eyes slightly moved. He thought that she had deliberately led the way in a curve. Most of them wanted to bypass the route that they had been to before. He said, "Maybe it is safer to go to the shelter that you have been to before. The most dangerous place is the safest. He certainly wouldn't think that we would dare to go to that shelter." Dana said casually, That does make sense. It's a pity that you don't know him. He is naturally suspicious, even more so than you. He will certainly figure out what I'm thinking and think that I will escape in a smarter way. If I really go there, I will be exposed immediately. Dean saw that she had her own understanding, so he didn't say anything more. At this time, the two gradually approached the towering ancient city. Looking from the sky, Dean saw that the ancient city was similar to the giant wall. It was also square, but the shape was similar to the ancient cities of China. At this moment, there were groups of soldiers patrolling above the city. They wore armor, but their faces were Western. They had white skin and blue eyes, and they were equipped with ancient firearms. Dean was more convinced that the Eastern continent should be in the west of the old era after seeing the appearance of the guards. At this moment, the guards on the city wall seemed to have seen them and rang the bell. Many soldiers quickly gathered in the direction they were flying. Dean looked at Dina. She didn't let Haisha slow down. She should have something in mind. Whoosh! A pair of dark red wings protruded from Dana's back. She let go of Aisha and flew straight forward. The degree of demonization also expanded. Soon, her whole body turned into a 3 or 4 meters tall giant. Her skin was red and slowly burned with flames. The wings on her back also burned into fire wings. Her body showed more obvious changes. Dean was dumbfounded. This is a new demonic body. Dean clearly remembered that her first demonic body was similar to a giant spider monster that could read memories. Her second demonic body was a sea monster that had scales all over its body. But the strange appearance in front of him was clearly a new demonic body. She has a third magic mark. Dean was shocked. Suddenly, he thought of what Dana had said in the belly of the sea monster. Burrow didn't know about her second sea monster magic mark. In an instant, he immediately understood. Burrow had implanted 2 magic marks in each of the Dana test subjects as a balance. One was from a Shinluo empire, and the other was from the eastern continent. It was the same for this Dana. Burrow should have implanted the first magic mark for memory reading, as well as the current blazing magic mark. As for that sea monster's magic mark, it was very likely that she had secretly implanted it into her body. Moreover, she had hidden it. She had hidden it under Burrow's nose. Why would she take such a big risk to implant a third sea monster magic mark on herself? It was obviously impossible to enhance her combat effectiveness. Dean could feel the exuberant energy from the flaming magic mark. It should be a very strong attack magic mark. The only explanation was that she had to use the sea monster magic mark. For example, escape. She had been waiting for this day for a long time. Moreover, she had been silently preparing for it. When the opportunity came, the prepared people would be able to seize it. Dean felt a burst of chill in his heart as he thought of this. He thought that he was deep enough and calculated far enough. But he didn't expect that Dana would be more courageous than him. Wouldn't it be exposed if Burrow had a whim to check her body? Taking such a huge risk for an opportunity that was unlikely to appear was simply a lunatic. Dean's pupil shrank as he saw an incredible scene. The demonic body gradually became complete. The outline of Dana's body gradually changed and became clear. The posture of the demonic body was unforgettable for Dean. Burning flames, dragon-like body, fire dragon race. This demonic body could turn into a fire dragon race. Dean had witnessed it in the fortress outside the war god's wall. He would never forget it. However, compared to the other fire dragons he had seen, Dana's body seemed much smaller, and she seemed to be lacking something. He couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it seemed like she wasn't violent enough and didn't have that kind of soul-shaking fear. Dana flew over the city while Dean was stunned. Her blazing figure brought a strong pressure. She didn't stop as she flew over the heads of many soldiers. Dean and Aisha followed closely behind. He looked at the soldiers who were retreating. Their faces were frightened and frightened. He gradually understood something in his heart. The soldiers didn't take any action even after Dean had flown far away. They still looked at him from afar. No one used their firearms to shoot. They just let Dean and Aisha fly over. Dean saw the second high wall after flying for a few minutes. The height of these high walls was about 200 meters. There were ancient Chinese buildings inside the high walls. It was bustling and lively. Chapter 983. There were also guards patrolling the second defensive wall. All of them knelt down and surrendered when they saw Dana flying over. Dean's guess was confirmed. The Fire Dragon clan should have a very high status in the empire of the Eastern Continent, even the royal family here. As he flew into the ancient city, Dean saw a large number of Westerners living in the ancient buildings of the East. His expression couldn't help but be a bit strange. He suddenly had doubts about his previous guess. Dana flew straight to the center of the ancient city. It occupied a large area and was majestic. This building was a bit like the Forbidden City. There were rows of patrolling guards everywhere. Most of these guards were Asian. Only a few of them were Westerners. The patrolling guards also noticed Dana when she came to the top of the building, but they turned a blind eye as if they didn't see her. Dean saw 3 or 4 figures come out of the palace-like building. All of them had Asian faces. They looked up at Dana, who was in midair. Whoosh! The flames on Dana's body gradually converged. Her demonized body had gradually changed back to human appearance when she landed on the steps in front of the palace. Dean and Aisha followed and landed on the side. He saw the doubts on the faces of the Asians. His heart moved, and he retreated a distance to the side. "Who are you?" A well-built middle-aged man standing in the middle looked at Dana in confusion, and the language he spat out was Chinese. Dean had an indescribable feeling in his heart when he heard the long-lost Chinese. It was like he had returned to his hometown. Dana looked calm. She slowly stepped forward and said, "I've been ordered to come here. Are you the manager of this place?" She also spoke in Chinese. The doubts on their faces disappeared when they heard Dana's words, but they were still a bit vigilant. The middle-aged man said, "Who are you? Whose order are you?" "We." His words stopped abruptly. Dana, who was slowly approaching them, suddenly sped up and turned into a streak of black light. The distance of more than 10 meters seemed like a single step as she instantly arrived in front of them. Puff, 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 puff. Among the 3 people standing on both sides of the middle-aged man, 2 of them had their chests pierced through in an instant, leaving bloody holes. The middle-aged man and the other woman in a cheongsam embroidered with peonies reacted quickly. The middle-aged man raised his hand to resist, but his body was hit and flew out. The woman in cheongsam's arm was cut off, and her body was thrown to the side. But her life was saved. However, Dana's attack was successful. Like a shadow, she instantly chased after the woman in cheongsam. Under the horrified eyes of the woman in cheongsam, the demonized sharp arm suddenly pierced through the woman's forehead. Dana turned around and flew into the palace without stopping. All of these changes happened too fast. Although Dean expected a fight, but he didn't expect Dana to be so insidious and cautious. Obviously, her strength was crushing the opponent, but she deliberately relaxed the enemy's vigilance and took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He followed up with Aisha. Dana grabbed the middle-aged man's neck and lifted him up. The burly middle-aged man was like a weak chick in front of the graceful and petite Dana. The maids and attendants in the palace were all stunned, but they quickly reacted. They pulled out their swords, arranged themselves in a formation, and stood guard in front of the highest throne in the palace. A handsome young man sat on the throne. He looked to be about 24 or 25 years old, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and a grave and stern temperament. However, at this moment, there was a hint of shock on his unsmiling face. "Who are you?" The young man recovered after 2 seconds of delay. His body was covered with black mucus. He had entered the demonic state in advance. Dana didn't answer. She just held the middle-aged man like a stone statue. The hall was silent for a while. Dean, who was standing behind Dana, clearly saw that a sharp black thorn suddenly appeared between Dana's thumb and forefinger, piercing through the middle-aged man's jaw. The middle-aged man's eyes turned white, as if he was dead. Read memory? Dean immediately thought of Dana's ability. He didn't expect that she would dare to do such a thing in the presence of a strong enemy. The young man couldn't hold back anymore, as Dana didn't answer. He waved his hand, and the surrounding guards swarmed over. At this moment, Dana slowly raised her head and looked at the sinister figures that had entered the demon body state one by one. They were all in different postures, and a wisp of fire suddenly flashed in her eyes. Raging flames seeped out of her body, and heat waves swept through the hall. The next moment, Dana, who was bathed in flames, shook off the middle-aged man and rushed forward. Ah! Ah! Screams of agony rang out one after another. The guards who had pounced at Dana were either sent flying backwards or had half of their bodies torn apart. Some of them came into contact with the flames on her body and were quickly set ablaze. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't put out the flames that were burning more and more fiercely. Dana didn't seem to see the guards. She went straight to the young man on the throne. The young man was shocked. He saw that Dana's strength was far beyond his imagination. Go to hell. Amidst his despair and fear, he suddenly roared and pulled out a dark spear from beneath the throne. His dark green clawed hand gripped the spear shaft and stabbed it explosively towards Dana. The spear's afterimages were like the wind, instantly producing thousands of spear sparks. The spear's shadow was gorgeous, but the more beautiful it was, the faster it withered. The spear's shadow was instantly shattered and extinguished. Clang! The metal fell to the ground. The spear head was broken. The cold-looking young man's body also froze. Two slender fingers that were like sword fingers stopped in front of his pupils. Although the fingers did not look like a hand that held a weapon, but more like a small hand that embroidered at home, he did not dare to act rashly. The piercingly cold, killing intent that enveloped his entire body instantly withdrew like tide water, and the cold young man felt as if he'd obtained a breath from drowning, causing his entire body to be covered in cold sweat. On the other hand, Dana, who didn't emit any killing intent before him, seemed to be slender, elegant, and extremely beautiful at this moment. But her indifferent eyes carried a haughty and arrogant expression, and she was like a queen that had descended to the world. Terror, grief, and indignation filled his heart as he gritted his teeth and said, "What do you want? I need to stay here for a while. You just need to serve me well." Dana put down her hand. The demonic flames on her body had already been extinguished. She said indifferently. The cold-looking young man was slightly startled, but he was secretly relieved. He immediately put on a respectful smile and said, "You can stay here for as long as you want. Just tell me what you need. As long as it's here, you can choose anything you want." The surviving guards at the bottom of the steps were stunned. They looked at each other in dismay and then looked at the cold young man in disbelief. They never thought that this cold and aloof king, who was always serious in speech and manner, would actually show such a flattering and humble smile. They thought that only lowly people like them needed to be flattered. It turned out that everyone was the same. "Let's solve the matter here first," Dana indifferently said. The young man naturally knew what she was referring to. He smiled and said, "Yes, I'll let them leave." He turned to the guards and maids. He restored his arrogant attitude and said in a cold voice, "All of you leave. Don't tell anyone about this matter. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. In addition, from today on, when you see this lord, it's like seeing me. No, it's more respectful than seeing me. If anyone is disrespectful, don't blame me for killing the third generation." "Yes, Lord." The guards bowed in panic. Dean looked at the young man. The latter's quick change made him admire him. Such a temperament wasn't comparable to others. After the guards left, Dana said to the young man, "Sit down." The young man's face slightly changed. He smiled and said, "You should take this seat." Dana glanced at him and stretched out her hand. There was a trace of fear in the young man's eyes. He instinctively wanted to raise his hand to block, but in the end, he resisted. He felt that Dana didn't want to kill him. The next moment, Dana's hand touched his face. So soft. This thought emerged in the young man's mind. He felt that these hands shouldn't be stained with killing, but should be used to serve people. Suddenly, his forehead hurt, and then his vision went black. Dean saw Dana's movement and knew what she was going to do. He couldn't help but envy her. The memory reading magic mark was really practical. She could quickly understand the local situation and make judgments in any strange place. It was 10,000 times better than torture. 5 minutes later, Dana let go of his hand. Dean was surprised. How could memory reading be so fast? When his memory was read, he felt like he had experienced his life again. Although there were occasional fast playback like a slide, he felt that at least 10 years had passed. Soon, Dean noticed that although Dana let go of his hand, the young man didn't open his eyes. Instead, a lot of cold sweat was oozing out of his body. There was a faint pain on his face. Dana didn't pay attention to him. She just lowered her head and thought quietly. After 10 minutes, the young man slowly opened his eyes. There was some confusion in his eyes. When he saw Dana, his eyes suddenly sobered up. He immediately stood up and respectfully knelt down. "Greetings, my king." His hand covered his chest. His posture was pious. It was completely different from the previous humility. It was like love from the bottom of his heart. Dean was stunned. He thought that Dana could control the sea monster. Obviously, her ability wasn't as simple as memory reading. She could even tamper with memories. Thinking of this, he felt a chill in his heart. If she used this on him, wouldn't he become a slave? This thought made him feel a huge sense of crisis. It was even more terrifying than when he was in Burrow's hands. At least at that time, his consciousness was still his own. But if he was in Dana's hands, once she tampered with his memory, then he would be completely finished. Pass down my order. Block the news of my arrival. Also, tell the Research Institute to stop all the current experiments and transport all the steel, cables, and other materials they need to the Yangyu Hall. From now on, no one is allowed to step into the Yangyu Hall without my permission. Dana's expression was cold as she gave out orders one by one. "Yes, my king," the young man respectfully replied. A moment ago, he was still holding the idea of temporary survival. But now he was completely kneeling in front of Dana's skirt. Dean's mood was complex, but soon he noticed something mentioned in Dana's order. He was surprised. "You want to do an experiment?" "Of course." Dana indifferently glanced at him. At the moment, she was standing in front of the stairs. The young man beside her was kneeling on the ground. His petite figure was wrapped in a scarlet robe, but he was overlooking everything. Dean suddenly felt a chill when she glanced at him. It was not because of the majesty she exuded, but the meaning contained in her eyes. He suddenly found that he had just come out of the tiger's cave, but had entered the wolf's cave. It seemed that Dana wanted to do something to him. Did she want to continue Burrow's experiment? Dean's face was ugly. No wonder she would take him and Aisha to leave at such a critical moment. Perhaps she had been thinking about him for a long time. She helped him get out of trouble just to take him away from Burrow's hands as an experimental subject. That night, under the arrangement of the young man, Dana, Dean, and Aisha stayed in a side hall behind the palace called Yangmoon Hall. Dana was familiar with the place, as if she had returned to her own home. She made a list of the materials needed and reported the names of the people who could be used. She let the young man make the arrangements. Dean looked at her, collecting the copper and cables. He suddenly guessed her idea and asked, "Do you want to make electricity to return to Shinluo Empire? You're not stupid." Dana glanced at him. "No wonder you can climb all the way to this position. If it was me, I might not be able to do this." Dean didn't feel proud of her praise. Instead, he was depressed because his idea was confirmed. "You want to return to Shinluo Empire because you want to go back to Sylvia and get back my super chip, right? This is only one of the reasons. Of course, it is also the main reason." Dana didn't refuse to answer Dean's question. "Unfortunately, you didn't learn the super chip thoroughly. Otherwise, I would be able to quickly master the knowledge in your memory. Anyway, I have a photographic memory, so I can learn quickly. Moreover, it is safer to return to Shinluo Empire. If Burrow is still alive, he will never think that we have returned to Shinluo Empire. After all, it is impossible to sneak across the war god's wall by relying on my strength alone." Dean felt an unspeakable sense of anger and powerlessness. He was more desperate than when he faced Burrow. Dana knew everything about him. He had no secrets in front of her. This made him unable to find any way to escape. Even if you have made a way to avoid Thunderbird, there is still a great risk. Why not continue to stay here? Dean wanted to persuade her to stay. It was not because of the super chip, but because he suddenly felt that if he was found by Burrow at this time, he might have more hope to survive. Chapter 984. The next day, Dana dispatched laborers to transform the Moon Hall into a laboratory. A large number of materials were transported to the square outside the hall and piled up. Dean was surprised that the technology of this seemingly ancient shelter wasn't backward at all. It actually had electricity. Of course, this electricity was only in the hands of the upper class. It should be a technology brought from the Eastern Continent Empire. After the transformation of the Moon Hall, Dana devoted herself to the experiment. She called the master of the Scientific Research Institute to be her assistant. Dean was ordered by Dana not to leave the Moon Hall without permission. He could only wander around the hall and think of a way to escape. Since he knew that Dana could tamper with his memory, he had been thinking about how to prevent her from tampering with his memory. He did not want to fall into the same situation as the cold-looking youth. However, no matter how he thought, he felt that there was no solution. After all, Dana knew how to use electricity to avoid the Thunderbird. It could be seen that she could not only access his memory, but also grasp all his thoughts. No matter what plan he had, when she read his memory, she would understand it all. My memory should not have been tampered with by her. Otherwise, I would not want to leave her. Dean sat on the stone railing outside the hall. He looked at the golden armored guards who were moving materials back and forth in front of him. His eyes were lost in thought. He repeatedly recalled all the pictures and details that Dana had taken control of the shelter. Slowly, he found a reason. When Dana tampered with his memory, it should have caused a lot of damage or resistance. This could be seen from the painful expression of the cold-looking youth after his memory was read. He remembered that when he woke up from the hospital bed, there was not much pain. Perhaps it was because of this that Dana did not tamper with Dean's memory. After all, Burrow was next to him. If he behaved strangely, Burrow would know that she had tampered with his memory. Later on, he was always the target of Burrow's attention. Dana could not find the opportunity to contact him and tamper with his memory. After that, he was on the run all the way. Dana also did not have the opportunity to make a move on him. However, when he escaped to the Eastern Continent, Dana had the opportunity to deal with him. However, she did not do it. He did not know the reason. Was it because she knew that he was unable to escape? So she was not afraid? Dean couldn't figure it out. Perhaps there was a deeper reason, but no matter what the reason was, it wouldn't be a good thing for him. She will be on guard against me after the suppression of my magic marks is over. The best way is to tamper with my memory. I must be on guard in advance. Dean silently thought. However, it was easy to say, but how could they guard against it? When Dana wanted to tamper with his memories, his thoughts would be known as well. Even his current thoughts would be understood by Dana, so how could he be on guard against it? Thinking of this, he felt a wave of sorrow in his heart. The memories of my birth have been dug out by her. Even if I make a plan in advance and then forget the plan, it will be detected by her. Damn, she will know my current thoughts and dig deeper. Dean couldn't help but rub his hair. He wanted to twist his head off. It was too annoying and distressing. It was useless to think about it. If he didn't think about it, was he just going to sit and wait for death? He felt even more powerless than when he fell into Burrow's hands. At the very least, his thoughts still belonged to him. Even if he cursed in his heart, Burrow wouldn't know. When he was in a restless mood, he suddenly heard a call from the front. Young master, young master. Young master, where are you? Young master, come out quickly. Don't scare us. The voice was not pleasant to hear. It was the voice of an out-of-shape woman. Dean was annoyed. He looked towards the direction of the voice and saw a 16 or 17-year-old boy hiding in front of a pile of copper coins. He was dressed in silk and satin clothes. At the moment, he had a smirk on his face, and there was a bit of complacency in his eyes. Young master is here. A golden armored guard who was transporting materials saw the boy and immediately called out to the woman. The woman was overjoyed and immediately ran over. When the boy heard someone snitch, he angrily stared at the golden armored guard. Suddenly, he rushed over, grabbed the guard's hand, and opened his mouth to bite. The golden-armored guard was a little flustered. He quickly hugged the boy and said, "Young master, don't break your teeth." The young man struggled relentlessly, brandishing his claws and baring his fangs as he tried to grab his throat. At this time, the woman had run over and quickly said, "Young master, don't hurt your body." The young man turned to look at her, then at the golden-armored guard in front of him. Suddenly, he sat on the ground, kicked his legs, and cried loudly. He cried like a child, or more accurately, like a baby. The woman seemed to be prepared. She quickly took out a candy and a small puppet from her pocket and handed them to him. "Young master, what do you think this is?" The boy opened his eyes and saw the candy and the puppet. He immediately stopped crying and grabbed them, giggling. The woman and the golden-armored guard were relieved. The golden-armored guard slightly cupped his hands to the woman and left in a hurry, for fear of getting into trouble again. The woman took the boy and patted the dust off his body. "Young master, listen to me. Let's go back. The Candy King is waiting for you. If we don't go back, they will go to war." When the boy heard her words, he immediately became nervous. He grabbed her hand and ran forward. "Young master, slow down," the woman hurriedly shouted. Dean rolled his eyes as he watched their backs gradually go away. He was bored by this episode. He was about to get up and return to the hall. Suddenly, his mind seemed to be hit by something. He was stunned on the spot. "Retard. Fool," he muttered to himself. "Fool, fool," he muttered to himself. His confused eyes gradually became brighter and brighter. He suddenly thought of an existence. Mental illness. What is mental illness? Dean had not seriously studied this knowledge, so his understanding was similar to most people. In his opinion, mental illness was a person who was difficult to understand. They were neurotic and had incomprehensible ideas. Yes, it was incomprehensible. How could a normal person understand mental illness? He couldn't help but want to laugh. It was as if he suddenly saw a ray of light in a desperate situation. It turns out that her magic mark ability is not invulnerable. Dean felt that he had accidentally found the flaw of Dana's ability. Although she could read all the memories of others and understand their thoughts, wouldn't Dana herself be disturbed in the process? The answer was, of course, no. Dean thought of Dana's arrogant attitude after reading the memory of the cold-looking youth. It was as if she was a monarch who had been sitting on the throne for a long time. This temperament change was very obvious. He didn't notice it before, but after repeatedly recalling these details, he noticed it. Of course, it was also possible that Dana herself had such temperament. After all, the posture she showed at the beginning had the majesty of a queen, but now it was more obvious. This discovery could not be used as strong evidence. But Dean also firmly believed in another point of view. When you stared at the darkness for a long time, your eyes would adapt to the darkness. In common terms, the more you see, the more changes there will be. It was like a person's experience of growth. People would mature because they had seen more things, and they would also develop different personalities because of different environments. Everyone's memories were based on their own environment. When Dana read the memories, it was equivalent to experiencing such an environment. It was inevitable that there would be some changes to one's personality, and something would be added to it. What if she saw the memory of a mental illness? Would she also become mentally ill, or would she become neurotic? However, Dean naturally would not let himself become mentally ill, but he could try to make his thoughts as complex and weird as a mental illness. He could conceive all kinds of strange ideas. When Dana read his memory, these ideas would also flow into her mind and collide with her own worldview. Thinking of this, Dean gradually became excited. This was a divine counterattack. He began to think hard about the specific implementation process and many strange ideas that would impact Dana's mind. Time passed unknowingly, and the sky was dark. When a servant came to inform Dean that it was time for dinner, Dean woke up and found that the sky was dark. He had been sitting here for the whole afternoon. He patted the dust on his trousers and followed the guard back to the hall. His dinner was left on the table. Dana was sitting in the seat of honor, eating a Chinese special dinner. Dean saw this familiar meal that he hadn't eaten for a long time. He suddenly felt nostalgic and came to the table to sit down. "You're an adult. Do you still need someone to order you to eat?" Dana glanced at him after he sat down. This glance seemed to have a deep meaning, as if she could see through everything. Dean's heart shivered, but on the surface he looked as usual. He lightly replied, "I'm not afraid to disturb your work." Then he lowered his head to eat. Dana didn't say anything more. After finishing her own meal, she stretched and said, "Chinese food is really good. It's much more delicious than the ones I used to eat. At least it's richer," Dean casually said. Dana got up and left after finishing her meal. Dean looked at her back, and the excitement in his heart suddenly extinguished. He suddenly realized that there was an obvious loophole in his idea. Letting Dana read the memory of a mental illness could indeed change her thinking, but it was only a change. Perhaps this kind of change would make her more violent and crazy. However, his ending would not change because of this. Moreover, he couldn't become a real mental illness, which meant that he would self-destruct first. When Dana read his memory, many of his ideas would be grasped by Dana, including the reasons and purposes of these ideas. She would understand all of them. Therefore, his afternoon of racking his brains was in vain. The excitement in his heart was once again extinguished. He felt that the dinner had become tasteless, as if he was chewing wax. After a very slow dinner, Dean slowly calmed down from his lost and desperate mood. He felt that at least he could try again or think of other ways. As long as he didn't give up, perhaps there was a way out. After comforting himself, he returned to his room and continued to think while slowly falling asleep. 2 days later, Dean was called by Dana to a separate isolated laboratory in Yanghua Hall. The appearance of this laboratory was not much different from the laboratory in Burroughs' underground base. Dean's heart sank. Dana really inherited Burroughs' idea. Not only did she treat him as an experimental subject, but she also wanted to complete Burroughs' experiment on him. "Don't be nervous. I'm just going to install a small thing for you." Dana looked at the gloomy face of Dean. Her expression was very indifferent. She took a prepared syringe from the hand of a gray-haired old man. Dean looked at the liquid in the syringe. He knew it was anesthetic. He looked numb, didn't speak, and didn't resist. After the anesthetic was injected, Dean felt that his body gradually became numb. He lost consciousness. Dana put him on the bed and locked his hands and feet. "Have a good sleep." Dana took another syringe. The liquid inside was blue. She injected it into Dean's jugular vein. Soon, a wave of drowsiness hit him. Dean struggled to open his eyes, but found that it was extremely difficult. His eyelids seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. He bit the tip of his tongue. Under the stimulation of the faint pain, he was a little sober. But after a few seconds, endless sleepiness hit him again. Dean finally couldn't hold on, and his vision darkened. After an unknown period of time, Dean felt a burst of pain in his brain. He was startled, and his muddled consciousness instantly awakened. Could it be that during the time he was unconscious, his memory was tampered with by her? Soon, his tense muscles relaxed again. He felt that he was still hostile to Dana. Based on this alone, he could be sure that his memory should be intact. The next moment, he felt a slight burning and tearing pain from his neck. He slowly turned his eyes to look. A soft white light shone on his face. Around him, there were several old figures walking back and forth, holding strange materials in their hands. At this time, Dean noticed that many things in the laboratory had little to do with electricity. Dana didn't seem to be experimenting with making insulating clothes. One of the old men saw Dean wake up and immediately turned and hurried away. After a while, Dana's figure appeared beside the bed. She leaned over and looked at Dean. Her neck exposed her chest. She stretched out her soft white hand and touched Dean's forehead. After a while, she nodded and said, "The fever is gone." "Not bad. How do you feel?" Dean thought of what she said before. He slightly opened his mouth, but found that his voice was so hoarse that he couldn't recognize it. What did you install on me?" Dana gently smiled. "It's nothing special. I installed the thing that BOLO was going to install for you. If you want to betray me in the future, this thing will immediately take your life." Chapter 985. You. Dean was angry, and then his face was full of despair. Seeing Dean's expression, Dana smiled and turned away. The two gray-haired old men followed her with a smile, fully showing the obedience of assistants. After the people around the bed left, the despair on Dean's face gradually disappeared. His dark eyes were like a bottomless pool. When Dana said that she wanted to install something for him, he had thought of this, so there was no surprise. Moreover, for him, the biggest problem at present was to crack the method of Dana's memory reading and leave her side. If he couldn't do this, even if there was a bomb hidden in his body that could explode at any time, he would not have the mood to care. However, Dana's action made him feel a little relieved, which meant that Dana had no intention of reading his memory for the time being. So he deliberately showed a sad and desperate expression, showing that he had completely given up. However, how was it going to break her memory reading? Thinking of this, Dean was really powerless and desperate. No matter what he thought, when his memory was read, his thoughts would be spied on by Dana and then cracked. It would be meaningless. It was like a time and space theory, without any answer. After thinking hard all night, Dean still had no clue. The next day, Dana came to the laboratory early in the morning. Seeing Dean lying on the bed, she patted his face to wake him up. "Get up. Today accompany me to make the electric clothes and the battery." Dean opened his eyes, knowing that she planned to return to Shenluo Empire. Dean didn't resist or ask anything. He got up in a lifeless state. There was no vitality in his eyes. He was like a puppet, a walking corpse. He got up, washed, and finished his breakfast. He followed an old man to the laboratory where Dana was making electric clothes. There were a lot of processed and smelted materials piled up in the laboratory. These materials were produced overnight by all the workshops in the city, and the industrial strength and manpower of the whole city were gathered, so the progress was rapid. In addition to the electric clothes, we also need a set of armor to wear outside to defend against the claws of the Thunderbird. Let them build this. Our task today is to make the electric clothes, the battery, and the electric ball. Dana saw Dean coming and immediately told him her thoughts and plans. Dean silently listened and said, "Insulating clothes can't be made of aluminum. Although it is a good insulating material, it is easy to melt under high voltage. The same goes for plastic." Dana nodded and said, "I know. The aluminum here has other uses. Let's make the electric suit first. You could be my assistant." Dean nodded slightly. His memory had been read by Dana. Dana knew everything that he knew. Dana also knew everything that he didn't know. Dana knew more than him, so he didn't have anything to show off. He could only be an honest assistant. During the experiment, time flew by without him noticing. 2 days later, 2 sets of insulating clothes were produced. After testing at different voltages, they were finally selected by Dean and Dana. Although the insulation of the 2 insulating clothes couldn't withstand high voltage, but it was the best that could be produced. Moreover, considering the limitations of the insulating material, Dana also installed a conductive device on the electric suit. When a voltage was too high, the electric suit would absorb part of the voltage and store it in the battery connected to the back of the electric suit. There were 8 long batteries at the back of each electric suit. In addition, there were nearly 80 batteries stored in the insulating backpack. When all the batteries in the electric suit were full, they could be replaced. In addition, Dana suddenly had an idea. She made an electric ball and an electrode rod. The electric ball would release electric current after 3 seconds. The electrode rod was 2 short rods. When they collided with each other, it would generate electric current. The principle was very simple. The reason why she made these 2 things was considering that thunderbirds lived in the clouds and fed on lightning. When they encountered a group of thunderbirds, they might be able to use electric current to distract them and buy time for themselves to escape. After everything was ready, Dana was ready to go. She called Dean and Aisha and left the ancient city together. Dean couldn't help but feel some regret when he thought that he would have to return to the Shenluo Empire as soon as he arrived at the eastern continent. He felt that he was like duckweed, drifting with the current. "What's in it?" Dean saw that Dana obviously had an extra backpack and asked curiously. Dana didn't hide and said generously, "It's some legendary flame soul worms from the eastern continent. After we return to Sylvia and find your super chip, we can continue Burrow's experiment. I know a little about this experiment. Don't worry, I'm sure. If I get some useful knowledge from the super chip, I'll be more sure. You'll soon become the first immortal god in this world." The corner of Dean's mouth twitched slightly. Sure enough, his fate had not been changed. He mocked. "Even God has to listen to your orders, doesn't he?" Dana suddenly smiled. It seemed that this sentence had poked the itch in her heart. She was in a good mood. She patted Dean's shoulder and said, "Don't be so depressed. As long as the experiment method is right, I'll also become an immortal god after you become a god. We can create a large number of gods to rule the world. At that time, you'll be my #1 general. I won't treat you badly. I can even give you freedom." Dean's eyes lit up. "Freedom?" Dana laughed more happily. "Yes, freedom." Dean nodded slightly and didn't say anything. But his eyes were no longer in the previous state of lifelessness. Seeing the change in Dean, Dana gently smiled and waved her hand forward. She had the posture of a king. "This world will soon be ours." "I hope so." Dean thought for a moment and looked at her. "Since you can change that person's memory, you should be able to change mine too. Why don't you do it?" Dana slightly pursed her lips and chuckled. "I thought you wouldn't ask. Although it's not difficult for me to change the memory, the impact on the victim is not small. That person's brain, nerves should have been damaged a lot. In a short period of time, there won't be any problems. But after a long time, there will be gradual problems such as amnesia, slow reaction, and so on. In serious cases, there will even be dementia." Dean was stunned. He didn't expect that there was such a big risk. No wonder Dana didn't do it to him. She probably didn't want to hurt him, the experimental body. Thinking of this, he smiled slightly in his heart. "When you sneak back, if you encounter a flock of thunderbirds, don't be disobedient." Dana turned her head and looked at him meaningfully. "You don't want her to be buried with you, do you?" Dean knew what she meant. She was worried that if he encountered a flock of thunderbirds, he would hold the idea of dying together with her. "I won't do stupid things," Dean said. "That's good." Dana nodded. Half a day later, under Dana's leadership, they returned to the coast. It was noon, and the sun was shining brightly. Dana looked at the sky, turned her head, and suddenly looked at Dean's eyes. "Your magic mark's ability should have her covered, right?" Dean was shocked, and his pores couldn't help but shrink. He instinctively wanted to deny it, but he finally held back the words. Yes, in the past few days when he accompanied Dana to do experiments, he felt that his physical strength was gradually recovering. His vision was getting wider and wider, and his strength was growing rapidly. The power of magic marks had returned to his body, and his whole body was filled with a strong feeling. However, he had been careful to hide it, and tried to perform as normal as possible. He didn't expect that he still couldn't hide it from Dana. Deny? If that was the case, would she be able to read his memory? Chapter 986. After a moment of entanglement, Dean finally chose to admit it. "How do you know?" Dana's mouth slightly curved. "The effect of the anti-magic potion will last for up to half a month. So that's how it is." Dean was secretly glad that he didn't lie. He looked at Dana. "What are you going to do? Continue to imprison my magic marks?" "Don't be nervous." Dana indifferently smiled. "I don't need to give you the anti-magic potion with that thing shackling you. On the way back, you will be a burden if you don't have the power of the magic marks. I may not be able to protect you if you encounter a flock of thunderbirds. But don't think about taking this opportunity to escape. Once you cross the war god's wall, the thing in your body will take your life before I see your figure. I don't need to do it myself." Dean knew that she was warning him. He did have such thoughts, but whether her word were true or false, he wouldn't take the risk. After all, life was only once, and if he made a wrong choice, it would be gone. "I know." His voice was low, showing a sullen attitude. Dana's eyes flashed, but her face didn't care. "In that case, let's get ready to set off. Today's weather is sunny, and it's daytime. Let's fly directly over." "Will we encounter the flame birds if we fly over?" Dean quickly asked. Dana glanced at him. In such weather, the flame birds will fly above the clouds to enjoy the sunshine. As long as we don't fly too high. Dean knew that she might have considered more than him, so he didn't say anything. Black mucus gushed out of Dana's body, and 4 thin cicada wings protruded from her back. The rest of her organs were still in human shape, but she was in half-demon form. Her body slowly rose. Dean didn't hide anymore. Black mucus also gushed out of his black body, and 2 black wings grew out like 2 huge blades. He didn't lose the magic hunting tool, but like Dana and Burrow, he had the magic hunting tool in his body. He could disintegrate it into the demonic body at any time when needed. Dean had a new understanding of the use of magic marks since the battle with the second Dana. The feeling was even deeper when he saw Burrow's attack. Aside from encountering the flame birds during the migration, Burrow had never entered the full demonic form. Dean even felt that the 12-winged demonic form wasn't necessarily the full form of Burrow's demonic form. After all, the 12-winged demonic form looked almost the same as a human except for the skin color change and the extra wings. This was very different from the other high order's grotesque demonic form. Most of the abyssal demons had a body fusion rate that was close to 100%. Once they were demonized, they would almost be in a monstrous form, and not much of their human form could be seen. During his daily experiments, Burrow would only demonize a portion of his body, sometimes even a single finger. This partial demonization required a lot of skill, and its effects were very obvious. In a protracted battle, it could greatly conserve stamina, and if used well, it could even display a combat strength greater than when he was fully demonized. After these days of observation and understanding, Dean gradually mastered the technique of the demonic form. At this moment, he only demonized the wings of the splitter on his back, but his body was still in a human form. Dana smiled indifferently, seeing the changes in Dean. She knew about Dean's observation of the demonic form from the last time she read his memory, but she didn't expect him to complete the observation and implementation in such a short period of time. The people of the old era were really smart. Dean hugged Dana and took off to follow her. Dana flew towards the sea, her body gradually rising. Gradually, she was 300 to 400 meters above the sea, and she continued to rise. Dean followed closely behind. He felt a burning sensation from the sunlight on his body, and the intense radiation was scattered through the clouds of nuclear dust. They flew over the shallow sea all the way forward. The magic marks in Dean's body moved, and circles of light golden halos appeared in his pupils, like the eyes of an insect. It was extremely frightening. In his line of sight, the world had undergone great changes. He could see countless tiny dust particles, and there seemed to be tiny fly-like insects lying on the dust particles, flapping their wings from time to time. However, this scene couldn't be seen by ordinary vision alone. No one would have thought that there would be so many tiny dust particles and tiny flying insects in this seemingly pure and transparent air. If an ordinary person lived in such a place and inhaled a large number of tiny flying insects, it wouldn't take long for their body to collapse, and all kinds of diseases would appear. In Dean's eyes, Dana's body was gradually penetrated. His line of sight penetrated through the armor, and even saw the veins forged by the metal materials inside the armor, and then saw the electric cloak. As his line of sight continued to penetrate, a white body appeared in front of him, but soon the snow-white body quickly passed by and entered a deeper picture. The pores were enlarged, and his line of sight became blood red. He was attracted to the intricate capillaries, deep veins, blood vessels, bones, and so on under the epidermal tissue. Dana's body appeared in Dean's line of sight, like silk being peeled from a cocoon. There were no secrets to study, and he could completely see the structure of her body. This body, Dean's pupils slightly shrank, and a trace of horror flashed in his eyes. If not for his strong control, he would have been scared out of his voice. He suspected that he was looking at a monster, but when he withdrew his line of sight, the figure in front of him was still Dana's graceful figure. His face changed, and his heart was shocked, and at the same time, he felt a bit frightened. As he had expected, there were indeed 3 magic marks in Dana's body. 2 of them were under the 2 plump parts of her chest, and the third one was on the back of her neck, embedded in the top of the cervical spine. It was hidden very deep. The inside of the spine was hollowed out, and a meat sac was padded, and a magic mark was resting in this meat sac. The soft tissues that oozed out of the meat sac were mixed with very fine blood vessels, which are like strands of hair floating out along the gap between the vertebrae, connected with the flesh and blood outside the vertebrae, and absorb the body's blood circulation. At the same time, it could also transmit the power of the magic mark in the meat sac. It had to be said that this level of experiment was simply a kind of gorgeous art, and it was so exquisite that it made people speechless. He suspected that the third magic mark was planted by Dana herself, and the technique was completely different from the other 2 magic marks. It was more delicate. In addition to the 3 magic marks, the most shocking thing to Dean was the organs in Dana's body. It was too strange. For example, her stomach was not a human stomach. It looked like a dark purple water sac. However, there were 2 inches of soft tentacles on the surface. They were firmly attached to the flesh and couldn't be shaken. In addition, her intestines were even more terrifying. There was only a very short section of the large intestine, but it was covered with sharp teeth. The small intestine was like a viper, and there were obvious bumps and bumps on the surface. The surface was unusually smooth, and the inside of the intestine was stained with a thick layer of butter. In addition, her skeleton was also very strange. It was not a complete skeleton, but rather a skeleton that was pieced together from different bones. How many experiments has Burrow done on her body? Dean felt that in the dark laboratory, Burrow was repeatedly dissecting the body of a girl and implanting tissues taken from ugly monsters. That feeling was too crazy. Have you seen enough? Dana's voice suddenly came to him. Dean was surprised, and the circle of pale golden color in his pupils immediately disappeared. He was at a loss. What? Dana tilted her head and looked at him with a faint smile at the corner of her mouth. Isn't your magic mark ability able to see through things? Have you seen my body? She exhaled a breath that smelled like orchids, with a faint feeling of lust. Dean didn't have the slightest interest in her. In fact, even if she stood naked in front of him, it would only make him feel disgusted. At the same time, he had a new understanding of Burrow's ruthlessness. He shook his head. I didn't see. Will we meet Burrow or the other kings if we fly over? Dana's mouth twitched as she saw Dean change the topic. But she already knew the answer, so she was too lazy to pursue it. She casually said, I deliberately took a detour. We are more than 300 kilometers away from the place we came from. If we meet him, then we can only consider ourselves unlucky. But I have always been a lucky person. Dean smiled slightly. But I have always been unlucky. Perhaps this time Dean really benefited from Dana's light. They flew over the sea in peace. They didn't encounter flame birds in the sky, nor did they encounter attacks from the sea. After arriving safely, Dean and Dana sighed at the same time. Dana said with a smile, I said that my luck is good. Dean smiled bitterly. Let's go. Dana stepped into the forest in front of them and continued to hurry. Dean followed her closely. After walking straight for more than 10 hours, it was already 2 or 3 o'clock at night. The two finally saw the god of war's wall standing between heaven and earth at the end of their vision. The more than 3,000 meters high god of war's wall was like a continuous giant mountain, bringing endless sense of oppression. Let's rest for the night and set off tomorrow at noon. Dana withdrew her gaze and said to Dean. Dean nodded. If they sneaked in at night and attracted the attention of the Thunderbirds, it was easy to attract the attention of the Imperial Border Guards. It was a little better during the day. The two each chose a big tree in the forest and slept on the tree branches. The surrounding poisonous forest snakes didn't even get close to the two before their bodies automatically broke and fell down. The broken body twisted in pain. Your perception seems to be good. Dean leaned against the tree, looking at the night sky and talking to Dana. Dana said indifferently, Haven't you already guessed it? Just as you thought, my first magic mark is Dream Breeder. Dean's face changed slightly. He did associate her memory reading magic mark with Dream Breeder. He didn't expect it to be true. Various information about Dream Breeder suddenly appeared in his mind. However, there was very little description about Dream Breeder in Sylvia's Monster Atlas. It was only known that this thing could pull people into an illusion through poison and make them unknowingly fall into an illusion during battle. From the ability that Dana showed, the ability of Dream Breeder was obviously more than that. This should be the top 5-star legendary monster. Whoosh! Dana's body suddenly moved. She jumped into the grass under the tree and grabbed a monster that looked like a rabbit and a cheetah. This monster had leopard patterns all over its body, but its body was only the size of a rabbit. There were 2 pointed ears on the top of its head, but its sharp teeth were longer, like the teeth of a saber-toothed tiger. Dean turned his head and saw that her fingers had demonized. Her nails turned into black needles and pierced into the forehead of the little monster. After a while, the demonization of Dana's fingers recovered. She threw away the little monster that kept twitching on its legs and then jumped onto the tree branch where Dean was lying. "What's wrong?" Dean had a bad feeling. "Nothing. Just looking at what you've been thinking during this time," Dana said indifferently. Dean's face changed. He instinctively wanted to raise his hand to resist, but he saw a meaningful light in the depths of Dana's eyes. He suddenly thought of the unknown thing installed in his body and suddenly became silent. Dana's figure flashed. She instantly approached Dean and touched his forehead with her palm. Dean felt his vision turn black. Countless pictures flipped in front of him. This time, the speed was faster than the last time. About a few days later, he opened his eyes, but it was still night. Dana had retreated and stood in front of the branches, looking at him with interest. Dean knew that his thoughts these days had been completely exposed. His face was completely gloomy, but thinking that he was still hostile to Dana, he was a little happy. This meant that his memory had not been modified. "You really are a threat," Dana said with a smile. Dean felt a chill all over his body. He reluctantly smiled and said, "I've given up." "I know." Dana smiled slightly. "However, it's ingenious to think of using mental illness to interfere with my memory reading and even modify my memory. Unfortunately, it's all in vain." Dean showed a wry smile. "Since you've already given up, then follow me obediently." Dana leaned close to Dean, lifted his chin with her hand, and gently blew out a fragrant breath. She said with a bit of charm and domineering. Dean felt that she was becoming more and more masculine. Sure enough, reading the memory of the cold-looking youth in himself had a certain influence on her. "I will." Dean looked straight at her and sincerely said. Dana stared at his eyes and suddenly smiled. She retreated to another tree and said, "I won't believe you again. Who knows what else you can think of in your mind? Go to sleep. Maybe there will be a hard battle tomorrow." Dean's mouth slightly moved. He secretly sighed. These days camouflage had been in vain. He knew why Dana suddenly read his memory. It was not a whim, but because she was worried about an accident during the smuggling. Facing such a cautious enemy, he felt like seeing a beautiful woman with a weak kidney. Powerless. He just lay there, looking at the stars through the gaps of the leaves. The stars were bright, and the universe was vast. The stars were always so mysterious and beautiful. Chapter 987. The night always passed quickly. When dawn came, Dean and Dana slowly woke up. They were like buds buried in the darkness of the soil, spreading their bodies to welcome the new day of sunshine. Dana didn't set off immediately after eating barbecued monsters. Instead, she sat on the treetop and waited quietly. When the hour hand of the mechanical watch pointed to it was the time when the sun was at its peak. Dana heated up the remaining monsters for lunch. After filling their stomachs with Dean, they got up and carried their luggage. They looked at the god of war's wall in the distance, and their expressions gradually became serious. "Get ready," Dana whispered. Dean nodded slightly, and a pair of magic wings appeared on his back. Whoosh! Dana took the lead and soared into the sky. Dean grabbed Aisha and quickly chased after her like a sharp arrow. The two flew straight up into the sky, and in the blink of an eye, they flew to a height of 3 to 4,000 meters. Looking from afar, they could see the dense figures on the God of War's wall. Dana continued to increase her altitude, and in the blink of an eye, she flew to a height of about 6,000 meters. The surroundings were already shrouded in thin clouds. The clouds looked like smoke, but there was a kind of wet feeling. It contained moisture, and there was a kind of cool feeling. Dana continued to fly up into the clouds. The surrounding sea of clouds was like cotton, bulging up. The sky above the clouds was very blue, and the arc was curved. From this point, it was enough to confirm the Earth circle theory. "Keep up full speed," Dana whispered. Her body was like an eagle, flying forward quickly. Dean's eyes were solemn, and he accelerated to keep up. Circles of light, golden halos gradually appeared in his eyes, and his field of vision increased sharply. He could see the moisture in the surrounding clouds, as well as countless small, strange insects. In less than 10 minutes, Dean saw the towering God of War's wall through the clouds and missed about 3 to 4,000 meters below. It was like a giant axe lying across the earth, cutting off all the mountains and rivers. He didn't know if the people on the God of War's wall could detect them. Dean's eyes flashed, but he wasn't too nervous in his heart. Perhaps it was a good thing that they could detect them. At this time, bright red spots suddenly appeared on the upper edge of his field of vision, spreading like a disease on his eyeballs. Dean fixed his eyes and saw a bright red heat source appearing in the clouds above his head. Thunderbird. Dean's heart tightened. Although he had fantasized about encountering a flock of thunderbirds and Dana being killed by them, it was obviously too good of a dream. If they really encountered danger, he might be the first to be sacrificed and take Dana down with him. "Charge," Diana said in a low voice. Her speed suddenly increased again as she drew a snow-white arc through the thin clouds around her, but from the ground, it looked like a straight line. Dean's heart sank. He raised his hand to shake the bell and pushed Aisha out. "Who?" Bright red fire-like wings spread out from Aisha's back. She entered the full demon body state and turned into a dragonoid. She was somewhat similar to the fire dragon race, but they were obviously two different species. Her wings were made of flesh, and there were no flames all over her body. The reddish-brown cuticle covering her body looked extremely thick and tough at first glance. Part of her body was covered with scales, which were completely different from the fire dragon race, whose whole body was burning with flames. Only the appearance was similar. After releasing Aisha, Dean immediately sped up and chased after Dana with Aisha at full speed. At this time, he suddenly found that the strength of this Dana was more than twice as strong as the two Danas he had met before. He tried his best to barely keep up with her, but her heartbeat was still stable, and her breath was also very stable. There was no feeling of strain at all. Dean's heart sank. This was not a good thing for him. He felt that this Dana might have the strength of the upper abyss or the Lord of the Abyss. As the two accelerated, the bright red heat source above the clouds in front of them seemed to notice them, and immediately rushed toward them like a whole cloud of fire. 2 minutes later, the bright red heat source appeared in Dean's sight. It was a huge, strange bird with dark purple feathers. There were curved horns on the top of the head, and there were sharp claws under the wings, as if the claws were arms, and the wings were just robes attached to the claws. "Charge!" Dana's eyes were like lightning, and a black cuticle appeared all over her body. Her body also entered the half-demon state. Her limbs didn't deform, but only the epidermal organs were demonized. Screech! Screech! The ear-piercing bird cries sounded, and the chirping was especially sharp. Dean saw the crackling electric light on these birds with dark purple feathers, and he knew without a doubt that they were thunderbirds. He took a deep breath and imitated Dana. His epidermal body also entered the demonization, and a layer of black carapace appeared. Whoosh! Dana's body drew an arc, and she dived down. After flying at full speed for 2 minutes, they had already left the airspace above the Battle God Wall. Their flying speed was close to 10 kilometers per minute, and they had flown 20 kilometers in 2 minutes. Even if they landed here, given their abilities, they would be able to escape before the scouts hidden behind the battle god wall could catch up to them. But screech! The flock of thunderbirds approached in the blink of an eye. Their speed was astonishing, and they were not inferior to Dana. Especially when they dived down from above, all the thunderbirds were jumping with electric light, as if they were being struck by lightning. Boom! A lightning flashed, and it struck Dana in front. The speed of the lightning was so fast that Dana had no time to react. Her body was suddenly shocked, and she almost fell. Dean saw this scene, and his face changed slightly. He quickly let Aisha retract her demonization body, and, at the same time, he retracted the wings that extended from the back of the armor and let his body glide forward and fall. Although the insulating conductive electric cloak inside the armor could protect them, the demonized wings were enough to become the target of electric conduction. This was a problem that they couldn't solve, and they could only rely on luck and the electric ball to support the time of natural fall. Once they reached the ground, they would be safe. But how long would it take to fall from a height of more than 6,000 meters? Dean and Dana had previously calculated that according to the falling speed of an ordinary person, it would take about 50 to 70 seconds if they were in a vertical posture. But their falling speed was obviously faster than this. First, their body density was high, and their body was heavy. Second, their backpacks were embedded with lead plates to increase the weight. According to their calculation, it would only take about 20 seconds for them to fall naturally. 20 seconds was very short, but at this moment for them, it was the distance between life and death. Whoosh! In less than 3 seconds, the Thunderbirds approached again, and the distance was less than 1,000 meters. Hiss! A dazzling, crackling electric light suddenly ejected from the Thunderbirds, hitting Dean and Dana. The electric light flashed, and the sky flashed. Although they were armed to the teeth, and their bodies were tightly wrapped in the electric cloak, they still felt a kind of numb feeling when dozens of lightning bolts hit them, as if there was a weak electric current flowing through their bodies. The electric current exploded on the surface of the armor, pushing the two of them down even faster. Dean didn't care about the increase in falling speed. Through the induction of the experiment in advance, he knew that the 8 batteries on the electric cloak were close to saturation, and this was just the first round of attack. Moreover, not all the Thunderbird attacked at the same time. A golden halo appeared in Dean's eyes, and the bodies of all the Thunderbirds in his field of vision were penetrated. He could see the blood flow in their bodies, as well as their skeletons. Soon, he saw that there was an electric current flowing in the blood vessels of these Thunderbirds. The electric current was white and as thin as a strand of hair. There was a shocking amount of it. When it gathered on the surface of their bodies, it immediately shot out a bolt of lightning. It was too fast for Dean to dodge, and he couldn't even raise his hand to parry. He was hit again, and the numb feeling in his body became stronger, and he even felt a slight electric shock. The batteries were already saturated. Whoosh! At this time, Dana, who was in front of him, grabbed 2 electric balls from her backpack and threw them to the right. The speed of the electric ball was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it flew a kilometer away and suddenly burst into a dazzling electric light. The electric light was scorching hot, and it quickly attracted the attention of the Thunderbirds. The Thunderbirds near the electric ball immediately left the formation and flew toward the electric ball. The chaotic electric current ejected from the electric ball hit these approaching Thunderbirds, and they made bursts of cheerful sounds, as if they were bathed in lightning. Soon, one of the Thunderbirds with the larger head and the fastest speed rushed to the electric ball. With a cry, it opened its mouth, picked up the electric ball, and swallowed it. Whoosh! At this time, Dana threw another electric ball to the other side, and soon, many Thunderbirds on the side of the flock rushed over to fight for it. The number of Thunderbirds in this flock was about 1,000. At this moment, 100 or 200 scattered, but there was still a dark mass of them, and they continued to chase Dana. When Dana threw the electric ball, she held a few electrode rods in her hand. She threw 2 electrode rods at the same time, and they flew into the flock of Thunderbirds in front of her. The electrode rods crossed each other, and collided with each other. Suddenly, there was an electric light that was even more dazzling than the electric ball. The flock of Thunderbirds suddenly became a little chaotic, and they all rushed to fight for it. During this short interval, Dana quickly took out the batteries from her backpack and replaced the batteries on the back of the electric suit. Her hand speed was so fast that it was almost done in a second. This kind of speed was very difficult, even for an Abyssal. When she threw the electric ball, Dean had already replaced the batteries first, and the 8 batteries that were already saturated were thrown out. Immediately, dozens of Thunderbirds noticed the 8 batteries. They flew over, grabbed them with their beaks, and swallowed them. Dean did not wait for the Thunderbirds to restore their formation again. He took out the electric ball from his backpack and quickly threw it out. Whoosh! Whoosh! One by one, the electric balls were thrown to the left and right, bursting with dazzling electric light. The originally orderly flock of Thunderbirds was now scattered, and they were chasing the electric balls around them. Dean and Dana took turns to throw the electric ball and attracted more than half of the Thunderbird away. However, there were still 200 or 300 Thunderbirds staring at them, constantly ejecting lightning. Fortunately, they were barely able to resist the electric strikes of these 200 or 300 Thunderbirds, but they did not have time to replace the batteries. Dean felt a numb feeling in his body again. He gritted his teeth, took out 3 electric balls, and fiercely threw them at the Thunderbirds in front of him. The electric balls exploded, and 3 electric lights flashed. The flock of Thunderbirds suddenly slowed down as if they had hit a wall, and they pounced on the 3 electric balls. The surrounding Thunderbirds also rushed over, but soon, the 3 electric balls were swallowed by the 3 fastest Thunderbirds. When the electric balls disappeared, the flock of Thunderbirds pounced on them again. Dean had already replaced the 3rd battery and threw out the replacement batteries. As soon as the batteries flew out, they were snatched by the Thunderbirds. Dean saw that they seemed to have experience in snatching, and their speed was getting faster and faster. The electric balls that were thrown out did not fly far, and were snatched by the Thunderbirds. Even before the electric balls burst out, they had already been swallowed by the Thunderbirds. Lightning exploded on the Thunderbirds' necks, but it did not cause the slightest damage to them. Dean hurriedly glanced at the ground, and his heart sank. The objects on the ground were about the same size as he saw from the War God's wall. After so long, there was still a height of 2,000 or 3,000 meters, which meant that they still had to hold on for another 10 seconds. But more than half of the electric balls and electrode rods in his backpack had been consumed. Moreover, in the process of chasing the electric balls, the Thunderbirds were getting closer and closer to them, almost surrounding them. The electric balls could no longer be thrown far away, and the pulling effect was greatly reduced. Screech! A Thunderbird flew over with a strange cry and opened its sharp claws, trying to pinch Dean. Dean's eyes flashed coldly, and his hand that was wrapped in steel gloves fiercely smashed out. Bang! His fist hit the Thunderbird's sharp claws. The Thunderbird's sharp claws were broken, and its body flew obliquely to open the distance. At this time, the Thunderbirds were getting closer and closer, and from time to time, there were electric balls shooting over. Dean saw a Thunderbird pounce on Aisha and quickly whistled. Aisha, who was falling vertically, suddenly reached out and grabbed the flying Thunderbird. She opened her mouth and bit on its sharp blade, tearing off a piece of flesh. The Thunderbird screamed in horror and quickly beat its body in pain. Its whole body exploded with a strong electric light. Dean's face changed. Although Aisha's electric suit was somewhat different from theirs, and the electricity was not stored in a battery, but a big electric ball in the backpack. However, the saturation of the big electric ball was also limited, and, at most, it was equivalent to 3 sets of batteries. Once it was saturated, it could not be replaced again. This was also the reason why he and Dana did not choose to use the big electric ball. Although it was risky and troublesome to replace the batteries, they were equipped with 6 sets of batteries, which were equivalent to the storage of 2 big electric balls. The big electric ball storage suit was specially made by Dana for Aisha. After all, there was no such thing as replacing the batteries in her order. After the previous continuous electric shocks, The big electric ball in Aisha's backpack should be close to saturation, or even full. While Dean was nervous, Aisha's fierce power did not diminish. Shrouded in the electric light, she constantly gnawed the Thunderbird's claws. Dean quickly blew the command to stop the attack. Aisha let go, and the Thunderbird broke away from her hand and hurriedly flew away. Chapter 988. The electric shock is ineffective. Dean's eyes moved. Aisha, who had been violently electrocuted by the Thunderbird, was only slightly injured. She seemed to have a unique resistance to lightning. Maybe this was an opportunity? Escape. Dean immediately thought of this, but he quickly extinguished it. Dana also had the command to control Aisha. However, Aisha's special lightning resistance could at least ease the pressure on him a lot. He immediately whistled and issued the command. Whoosh! The demonized wings on Aisha's back rose, and her whole body demonized into a dragon man. Dean grabbed her demonized dragon tail, and with a whoosh, Aisha's body flew down vertically like an arrow. They were approaching the ground rapidly. Whoosh! Some Thunderbirds noticed Dean and Aisha retreating quickly and immediately swooped down. But at this moment, Aisha was also flying at full speed and was not caught up. Lightning bounced from the Thunderbirds and hit Dean's body, passing through the surface of the armor to Aisha's body. But her body didn't change at all, not even a moment of stiffness or pause. Dean turned his head and saw that Dana's body was still falling vertically, but the speed was obviously very slow. In the blink of an eye, he had pulled away from her. The Thunderbirds that couldn't catch up with Dean immediately turned back and pounced on Dana. Soon, Dana was surrounded by Thunderbirds. At this time, Dean, driven by Aisha, was close to the ground, only about a kilometer away. Seeing that the Thunderbird didn't keep up, he also used his magic wings to cut off the wind created by Aisha and quickly landed. After landing, Dean looked up. Dana was still about 2 kilometers high, and she was falling rapidly, but she was surrounded by layers of Thunderbirds. Lightning flashed, and there seemed to be a group of thunderclouds surging in the air. Surrounded by Thunderbirds, Dana's figure was no longer visible. Only blazing lightning could be seen bursting from time to time, causing a small commotion. Dean stared closely, secretly praying in his heart, praying for the Thunderbirds. Although this was a rare opportunity, he still didn't intend to leave. First, his body was implanted by Dana with an unknown object. Although he couldn't feel what it was, it didn't seem that Dana deliberately blackmailed him from the various laboratory instruments. Second, although Dana was in danger at this moment, he always felt that she still had a hidden card. Whoosh! The Thunderbirds gradually tightened their encirclement, and the bursting lightning was also suppressed. Dean felt his scalp tingle. Even if the king came, he would probably be badly battered. At this moment, the flock of Thunderbirds that had gradually gathered into a formation suddenly slowed down. Whoosh! A figure suddenly knocked away a Thunderbird and sprinted toward the ground. Her whole body was burning with raging flames. It was Dana. At this moment, her entire body was bathed in flames like a fire dragon. In the blink of an eye, she shook off the flock of Thunderbirds and rushed to the ground. Go! With a stomp of her foot, the terrifying impact caused the ground to crack. Her body was like a refraction of light as she shot forward rapidly. The flowers, grasses, and giant trees along the way were all set ablaze. Dean was startled for a moment and quickly chased after them with Aisha. Screech! There was a sharp cry from the flock of Thunderbirds above their heads. They quickly swooped down and shot lightning bolts down. Dean's head had been demonic, like a monster's head growing on his neck. His field of vision had expanded to 360 degrees. With the help of X-ray and dynamic vision, he carefully observed the flock of Thunderbirds. When he saw the white electric filaments swimming in their bodies, gradually accumulating on the surface of their bodies, he knew that they were about to eject lightning bolts. So he quickly moved his body. Bang! Bang! Bolts of lightning struck the ground or giant trees. Some trees with a girth of 10 people were split on the spot by the lightning bolts, and the lightning fire burned wantonly. After running for a while, a waterfall appeared on the ground in front of them. The ground seemed to be torn, revealing a deep ravine. The water of the waterfall fell vertically, and white waves surged. Dana took the lead and jumped into the ravine. Dean followed closely behind. Screech! The flock of thunderbirds above their heads let out shrill screeches, but their bodies slowed down slowly. They stopped above the waterfall and kept circling. Dana plunged into the pool at the bottom of the waterfall. Her fire dragon demonic body quickly converged and turned into a sea monster demonic body. Fine silver scales grew on her body, and she swam quickly in the water. Soon, blood appeared in the water. Under the surge of the waterfall, the blood became more and more, dyeing the pool red. When Dean rushed into the water, he saw a huge body like a mosasaurus in the water. There was a huge wound on its chest. Obviously, it was Dana's masterpiece. Dana swam to the front of the pool, where there was a stone crack. Dean let Aisha converge her demonic body, and the two followed all the way. After passing through the narrow stone crevice, the three of them soon arrived at a relatively large lake. Immediately, strange fish the length of an arm rushed over. The fish's mouth, which was originally the size of a fist, suddenly opened, revealing a mouth full of sharp teeth, big enough to swallow a human head. Dean's demonic splitting blade quickly cut off the fish. Using X-ray vision, he saw that it was a lake, and there were more strange fish in the distance. In addition, there were several deep shadows of behemoths. He immediately rushed upwards, and with a whoosh, he leapt from the surface of the lake. Dana also jumped out of the water at the same time. Her demonic body once again changed into a fire dragon demonic body, and she flew towards the lake. Screech! The thunderbird's cry came from above, but it was obviously a lot farther away. Dean flew to the shore with Aisha. He looked up and saw that the thunderbird was still hovering over the waterfall behind them. It seemed that it didn't notice that they had escaped here. Dana landed on the shore. Her demonic body converged, and her wet hair draped over her shoulders. She wiped the water stains from her hair and slightly gasped. She turned to look at Dean, who landed beside her, and chuckled. "Why didn't you take the opportunity to escape?" "I couldn't bear to leave you," Dean indifferently said. Dana covered her mouth and chuckled. "You're good at talking." Dean shrugged his shoulders and glanced around. He saw that Dana's armor and electric cloak were gone. There was no armor that could adapt to switching between three different demonic bodies. The close-fitting electric cloak was even more so. There was only a vertical opening for wings on the back. The electric cloak will be torn once the demonic body was fully transformed. Without armor or lightning suit, Dana was only wearing a thin cloth undergarment. It was wet and stuck to her body, making her petite but voluptuous figure look extremely alluring. "Do I look good?" Dana looked at him and asked. Dean also looked at her naturally, without the slightest shyness. "Yes." Compared to her, Dana glanced at Aisha, who was silent next to her. Dean smiled. "You have seen my memory. What do you think?" Dana slightly curled her lips. "Boring." She no longer paid attention to Dean. She lowered her head to tidy up her clothes and took off the backpack behind her. This backpack was not made of ordinary cloth, but a buckle of alloy iron. It was similar to the strap of a mechanical watch. There was a gypsum insulation layer inside. It was safe under the fire dragon's body. Dana took out the clothes from the backpack and glanced at Dean. "Turn around." Dean quickly turned around and said, "Let's wait for the thunderbirds to retreat, then we'll continue our journey. If we attract their attention and they chase us, there's nothing that can stop them." "Of course." Dana's voice came. Dean tore off his broken electric suit and armor. He didn't bring extra clothes to replace them, so he could only wrap the cloth together and tie it around his waist. It was like a primitive panty skirt. "I didn't expect the undeads to have a good resistance to lightning. I didn't notice it before. Is it because of the lack of water in their body? Let's go back and study it." Dana's voice came from behind. Dean's mouth slightly moved. He knew that she had noticed that he let Aisha rush to the ground first. He was silent for a moment and said, "Are you hungry? I'm going to catch some fish to eat." Dana rolled her eyes at him go. Dean immediately got up and went to the lake to catch fish. Soon he caught a few big fish that were half the length of a human. These fish were full of sharp teeth and looked hideous. Some of them had green blood flowing out of their bodies. It was highly toxic. Dean picked 2 edible fish monsters, skinned, and beheaded them. He picked a few pieces of the most succulent meat and cut them off. He found some dry firewood and set up a bonfire to barbecue. While Dean was busy with the food, Dana walked around the lake. She found that the lake was surrounded by mountains. The lake was not large, like a vertical collapsed basin. There was a small forest behind the shore. She could see the end of the forest at a glance. The water from the waterfall flows into the lake. The water in the lake should flow somewhere else. There must be a secret passage underground. Dana sat back by the bonfire and smelled the aroma of the fish. She smiled. If these thunderbirds don't leave by tonight, we will leave from the bottom of the lake. Dean nodded. He had no right to speak, so he could only agree. Soon, the fish was roasted. Dean handed her a portion and picked up the other 2 portions. His fingers turned into magic cutting blades. He cut the fish into thin slices and fed it to Aisha. Undead eating cooked food. Gee. Dana laughed. It seemed like she was ridiculing and sighing. Dean indifferently said, "Haven't you seen my memory? She has been eating cooked food for a long time. You can be quite stupid sometimes." Dana sighed. With your brain, if you were cruel enough to feed all of Sylvia's life to her, perhaps she would have the strength of a king. After all, she is a witcher who has turned into a zombie king. There is a big difference between her and an ordinary zombie king. In addition to the evolution of flesh and blood, her body will continue to awaken naturally. In the future, she will become a king, or even surpass a king. That's an exaggeration. Dean glanced at her. Even if she eats all of Sylvia's life, at most she will evolve faster. Moreover, she has already awakened 7 times. She has reached the limit of awakening. Who told you that 7 times of awakening is the limit? Dana looked at him mockingly. Dean was startled. The records of the Dragon Clan are limited. In a way, 7 times of awakening is indeed the limit. But that is the limit of a human. But for undead, there is no limit. Dana indifferently said, "The reason why awakening is divided into 1 to 7 times is that the monster genes implanted in the body of the Witcher will be completely awakened and completely integrated with the cells of the body. This is the limit of awakening. However, there's also super awakening above this." Dana chuckled. However, the super awakening is a bit troublesome. The proportion of monster genes is too high. It is easy to affect the thinking. Generally, the super awakening will have a big change in temperament. They will even think that they are a monster, not a human. Dean was stunned. He didn't expect such a change. Moreover, the super awakening is not the limit. Dana's words surprised Dean again. The super awakening is just a change from a human to a monster. But for the undead, when the body is super awakened, the monster genes are the majority. But it is meaningless because they have no thinking. After the super awakening, the monster genes in their body will continue to divide and mutate. Under the interference of the virus, it will mutate endlessly. In the end, no one knows what they will become because there is no end. Dana looked at the stunned Dean and said, "Although she will naturally awaken, but the speed of natural awakening is very slow. Of course, compared to when she was still a human, it can be said that it is very fast. But after the super awakening, it will slow down. At this time, if there is a large amount of flesh and blood, it will accelerate the body evolution and cell division and speed up the awakening. So, if you are willing, she has already become a king, or even a king can't match her existence. You can call her the God of Corpses." God of Corpses? Dean was stunned. Dana finished the fish in her hand and licked the little oil stains on her white, tender fingers. She looked at Dean with interest. "What? Are you regretting?" Dean recovered and sighed. "A little bit. If you knew this earlier, maybe you would really kill the whole Sylvia's life, and even kill everywhere to help her awaken. In this case, she will be your strongest power. Dana said indifferently. Then you will rely on her help to seize the ruling power of the Empire. You will have enough time to slowly study how to restore her. You won't have to hide or even fall into a desperate situation like now, right? Dean was shocked. He had thought about it just now. Dana said his thoughts almost word for word. It seemed that she knew him better than himself. But this is also good. Dean quickly calmed down and said, "A king's help indeed makes me excited for a moment. But even if I knew this earlier, I wouldn't do it." "I know you won't," Dana said indifferently. "You are worried that the higher her body awakens, the more mutations there will be, and the more difficult it will be to restore, right?" Dean smiled bitterly. "Do you have mind-reading skills?" "Of course. I should be the person in this world who knows you the best." Dana blinked and said, "Is it fun to seduce me in front of her?" Dean asked. Dana curled her lips. "Boring." Chapter 989. The flock of thunderbirds hovered above the waterfall and didn't disperse for a long time. Dean and Dana sat by the woods to rest. Half an hour later, Dana suddenly opened her eyes and looked up at the hovering thunderbirds. She frowned and seemed to think of something. She suddenly stood up and whispered, "Prepare to retreat." Dean saw that she had already guessed it and felt a little regretful. He opened his eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" Thunderbirds are specially trained air forces of the Empire. They are smart and intelligent. They have been hovering here for a long time. It should be a signal to the border guards on the God of War wall. We have to leave quickly. Dana's face was gloomy. She quickly packed up the luggage on the ground and kicked the bonfire into the lake to erase the traces on the ground. "Let's go." Dana was about to enter the water when her face suddenly changed. Bang! 7 or 8 figures jumped out from the surrounding stone walls and quickly surrounded Dean and Dana. Hidden sentries. Dana frowned slightly when she saw the dark military uniforms of these people. She glanced at other places and didn't know if there were more people hiding in the dark. Dean didn't expect that the hidden sentries behind the God of War wall had already lurked here. He was surprised. He looked at them with thermal vision and found that there were no heat fluctuations emitting from their bodies. They were like dead people. Moreover, there was a smell of soil on their bodies. It was no wonder that he and Dana didn't notice them. However, these people didn't make a move. They were either waiting for them to be alone and expose their flaws, or they didn't have the confidence to deal with 3 Abyss-level masters. "Stop," one of the burly men said in a low voice. Like the others, he wore a black mask and only revealed a pair of shining eyes. "What's wrong?" Dana looked at him calmly with a trace of innocence on her face. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The burly man said in a low voice. "Is it forbidden to enter here? Didn't you see the notice?" Dana's mouth curved into a smile. Dean couldn't help but sigh in his heart as he saw the dialogue between the two. It seemed to be a simple and normal question, but in fact, it exposed the purpose of both sides. The problem exposed by the hidden sentry was undoubtedly fatal. Originally, they weren't sure if there were any experts lying in ambush in the surroundings, waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack while they were fighting. However, the hidden sentry's words seemed normal, but in fact, they were deliberately stalling for time. After all, no matter what their purpose was, it wasn't something that could be clarified with just a few words here and there. The best way was to capture them and interrogate them. And the best way to arrest them was to attack them with full force as soon as they appeared, exerting both psychological and physical pressure on them. The reason why Dana spoke was also a test. Through the second sentence of the hidden sentry, she had already gotten the answer she wanted. When Dean secretly sighed, the burly man coldly said, "You are also an Abyss walker. Don't you have a map? Not far ahead is the Battle God Wall, and everything within 100 miles of the Battle God Wall is a forbidden land." "Is that so? How come I don't know?" Dana was surprised, but there was a hidden smile in her eyes. The burly man was about to speak, but suddenly a black shadow attacked him. Dana instantly cut into the demonic body, and as fast as an afterimage, she suddenly approached the burly man. So fast, the pupils of the burly man shrank. Although he was already prepared, He didn't expect that Dana would suddenly attack. Moreover, her speed was faster than his reaction. In a hurry, he instinctively raised his hand to block with a dagger. Clang! The dagger was hit, and the shock numbed his hand. At the same time, a sharp pain suddenly spread from his chest, and then he felt a cold wind blowing past. He looked down and saw that his chest had been pierced by a dark and sharp spear. It wasn't a spear, but a pointed leg. Puff! The sharp leg was pulled out, and the black shadow suddenly retreated, avoiding the two sharp swords that stabbed from the back of the burly man. In this gap, one of the masked sentries quickly hugged the burly man who was slowly falling down. Although the face could not be seen clearly, judging from the figure, it was obviously a slender woman. There was a trace of grief in her eyes, and tears welled up. However, she did not hug the burly man and call out to him. Her emotions were out of control. She just gritted her teeth and said one word, "Kill." The other 6 sentries moved at the same time. At the same time they stepped out, they all activated their demonic bodies. In the blink of an eye, the 6 of them turned into 6 monsters. Some of them were half human and half snake. Some looked like a mole, and their bodies were covered with sharp black fur. Some of them had oval pink wings and antennae on their foreheads that fluttered sweet pollen. Dominator, Dominator. Dean's eyes swept around. When the sentries stimulated their demonic bodies, he saw that they were dominators. His heart was a little relieved. He didn't turn around when the 3 sentries behind him rushed over, but he knew the situation behind him. From the back of his spine, he suddenly demonized 3 blades and threw them out. Puff! The 3 sentries saw that Dean didn't look back and thought that he didn't react. However, the blades that suddenly shot out made the 3 people turn pale. The speed of the blades was so fast that it was faster than Dean's running speed. The 3 quickly stopped, but it was too late. They could only raise their enchanted weapons to resist. In the blink of an eye, 2 of them were cut at the waist, and their enchanted weapons were cut off. It was like a sharp knife cutting tofu. There was no sense of pause. The remaining sentries suddenly felt uneasy when he raised his enchanted weapon to resist. He rolled on the ground and dodged. Then he saw the bodies of his 2 companions fall to the ground. He couldn't help but turn pale. Whoosh! The 3 blade-like limbs swung to the left and quickly turned back to stab at the surviving sentries. The sentries hurriedly turned and ran. The speed of the explosion was beyond Dean's expectation. Unexpectedly, he was at the Abyssal Walker level. Even the heat fluctuations in his body had reached the Abyssal level. However, it was just the lower Abyssal level. Puff! The 3 blades quickly caught up and stabbed into the sentry's back. With a light pull, the body of the sentries was broken into several pieces and fell to the ground. Unexpectedly, there are 3 Abyssal Walkers. Their ability to control the heat source is simply top-notch. Dean secretly sighed in his heart. It was easy to expose one's smell and physical state when one entered the demonization state. Although the 3 sentinels had leaked some heat, they still restrained themselves. He was ashamed of his inferiority in control. He estimated that he would need to hone the dragon blood technique for another year and a half. Dana's battle was also over when he dealt with the 3 sentries. "Let's go." Dana shook off the slender sentries. The latter's chest was pierced through, and her death was the same as the burly man. Her throat was also crushed, and there was an obvious small hole on her forehead. Dean saw that Dana had read her memory. Splash! Dana quickly jumped into the water without the slightest pause. Dean held Aisha's arm and followed her. As soon as they fell asleep, Dana's demonic body turned into the shape of a sea monster. This time Dean saw it clearly. It turned into a strange fish that was 5 or 6 meters long. It looked like a shark, but there were 6 or 7 sharp blades on both sides of its body. When it swam quickly, these sharp blades were sharp weapons that could easily cut the body of other fish. Moreover, under the abdomen, there was a strange mouth full of sharp teeth. The eyes of this strange fish vaguely looked like Dana's. Its face was elongated and protruded, which looked very strange. Whoosh! Dana opened its mouth and swallowed Dean and Dana. Dean felt his body was tightly wrapped again, just like when he was swallowed when he went to the sea of the East Continent. However, this time he was no longer blind. In her mouth, Dean's heart was pounding. This time his demonic body was not suppressed, and he was in Dana's mouth. What a good opportunity this was. His pores slightly shrank. He was very nervous. His mind was calculating all kinds of scenes after he made move. After entering the demonic body, all the sharp blades on his body would attack at the same time and tear and pierce Dana's body from the inside out. For him, this process only needed a little more than a second. The extra second was the speed of his attack, and that second was the speed of entering the demonic body. It was also this second that was incomparably critical. If he had entered the demonic body at this moment, he would not hesitate to make a move. He didn't believe that Dana could react in time. However, that 1 second of demonic body was enough for Dana to feel it and then instantly spit him out. He hesitated and tangled in his heart, until more than 10 minutes later, he suddenly felt his body being squeezed out. He opened his eyes and saw light. He came to a shallow river, surrounded by green banks and forests. Phew! He felt inexplicably relieved, feeling both regretful and fortunate. What happened just now might have been a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but it might also have been destined to fail. After all, Dana knew about his demonic body and his unwillingness to give up, but she still dared to put him in her mouth, which was enough to show that she was fully confident and prepared. Maybe not. Maybe she knew that I was paranoid and wouldn't make a move? Such a thought emerged in Dean's heart. His eyes slightly flashed, and he finally smiled bitterly. He was indeed too paranoid. However, he felt that the possibility of this was very low. No one dared to put their life in the hands of others. A paranoid person might have a moment of decisiveness. Hurry up. Let's go. Dana jumped to the shore and quickly transformed into the demonic body. She spread her wings and flew away. Dean picked up Aisha and used his magic split wing to chase after them. Dean asked as they caught up, "Are there any masters in ambush around?" "Yes." "What did you read from the mind of that sentry?" "This is not something you should ask." Dana glanced at him. Dean shrugged slightly. The two flew all the way forward. They passed through mountains and rivers along the way. The ground quickly retreated under their feet. After flying for 4 or 5 hours, they encountered several flying strange birds along the way. Dana easily beheaded them. Finally, they came to a dark forest to rest. At this speed, it won't take us a few days to return to Sylvia. Dean sighed. It would take him a week to travel this distance. But now it only took him a few hours. No wonder he was called Abyss Walker. As long as he didn't run into the depths of the Devil's Pit, he wouldn't encounter much danger. Dana leaned against the tree and closed her eyes to rest. Prepared dinner. Dean sighed as he got up to look for monsters. Soon he came back with 2 furry tiger-sized monsters. He threw them on the ground and picked up the bonfire to peel and barbecue them. He handed one of the thighs to Dana and then took the other one and fed it to Aisha. He waited for Aisha to finish eating before he started to enjoy himself. Dean buried the extra corpses on the spot. He intended to extinguish the bonfire. After all, they didn't need to keep warm with their physique. But Dana stopped him. "It's comfortable to sit by the fire," Dana said lightly. Dean could only give up. He wanted to find more firewood. The sky gradually darkened and the night came. Dean and Dana rested against the tree. From time to time, monsters were attracted by the flames. Dana treated Dean as a guard and let him deal with them in advance. In the blink of an eye, the night passed. More than a dozen monsters' corpses of different sizes were lying around the place where they rested. Dana stretched and got up to greet Dean to continue their journey. For days passed in the blink of an eye. 2 figures flew over a forest and stopped. Is this the Forest of Despair? Dana looked at the vast forest. Although she had seen it in Dean's memory, but Dean's memory was from his own point of view. The area he could see was limited, but this time it was a panoramic view. Do you know what monster is under this forest? Dean's heart was moved as he heard her words. He remembered the giant tentacles under the soil when he passed through the forest. If the whole forest was alive, then what kind of monster would it be? It should be a domain monster, Dana said, and flew forward at the same time. Domain monster? It was the first time for Dean to hear such a thing. I've heard Biolo talk about this kind of monster before. This kind of monster is huge and can be regarded as a living thing. The range of their body is their domain. Even the king will be in danger if they step into it. Dana said casually. However, they generally won't take the initiative to attack. They have their own hunting habits. Like this forest, as long as you don't step into it, it should be fine. Dean nodded slightly. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Dana had just finished speaking when two black tentacles with a diameter of 4 to 5 meters suddenly shot out from the forest, slapping toward the two of them. Dana's face changed. She quickly said, "Fly higher." Dean didn't need her to tell him to fly higher to avoid the black tentacles. Since I can deal with the king, if I rush down, she won't dare to follow me. But in this case, although I'm out of her control, I'm also in danger. Moreover, I don't know what she has installed in me. Dean's eyes flashed and finally sighed. He was disappointed with himself. He was too powerless. The forest returned to silence after the two flew to an altitude of thousands of meters. Dana was relieved, but her face didn't look good. She snorted. "When our experiment is successful, we will burn this thing." Dean was silent. Chapter 990. I'm back. Dean looked at the red wasteland under his feet. He could clearly see the traces of reclamation left by Sylvia's warriors in the past. His mood was complicated. When he left the red wasteland, he was still a dominator, but he already had control over Sylvia. Now that he was back in the abyss, he couldn't even control his own life and death. Bang! Bang! A giant beast about 2 stories tall jumped out of the ground. It was covered in black iron armor like a rhinoceros, and its momentum was terrifying. Dean saw that it was a level 83 bone-eating rhinoceros. Its combat power was comparable to an inner wilderness master, but its body was clumsy and its shortcomings were obvious. It was easy to target. However, its skin was rough and its flesh thick. Inner wilderness warriors who didn't have a bit of courage generally wouldn't dare to hunt it alone. Dean soon saw 4 heat sources chasing after the bone-eating rhino. However, there was a clear gap between their speed and that of the bone-eating rhino. Once the bone-eating rhino started to run, only an expert who was extremely good at speed from the inner wilderness would be able to catch up. Otherwise, only an expert who had reached the sovereign level would be able to catch up. Dean saw the 4 heat sources. His heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly descended. Whoosh! He stopped 3 meters above the ground. Looking at the rapidly approaching bone-eating rhinoceros, he felt like he was being hit by a train. He took a deep breath and raised his hand. Roar! The bone-eating rhinoceros didn't slow down when it saw someone blocking its way. Instead, it roared and accelerated. The next moment, its head hit Dean's raised palm. Whoosh! Dean's body was pushed back by more than 20 or 30 meters before gradually coming to a stop. The bone-eating rhinoceros's hooves rubbed against the ground, creating 2 deep grooves. Roar! The bone-eating rhinoceros roared angrily. It stomped its hooves, ready to charge again. Dean smiled. Suddenly, 2 demonic blades shot out from under his armpits. Whoosh! The blades pierced the rhinoceros's face as if he was cutting tofu. The rhinoceros screamed, but it soon stopped. Its 2-story-tall body swayed slightly and fell to the ground with a loud crash. Bang! Dust flew up from the ground. Dean let go of his hand, and the demonic blades retracted. The bone-eating rhinoceros's skin was extremely hard, but it was still defenseless in front of the splitting blades. Whoosh! The 4 heat sources quickly caught up, and their figures also appeared in Dean's line of sight. Dean squinted his eyes and saw the armor and the engravings on the pauldrons. They were from the Dragon Clan. At this time, the 4 people seemed to have noticed Dean and the fallen rhinoceros. They slowed down and stopped. They looked at each other and whispered to each other for a moment. After a while, one of them flew out and slowly approached Dean. The man was shocked when he saw Dudian's appearance. You are the rebel, Wall Lord? Dean faintly looked at him. You know me? This should be the depths of the Red Wasteland, right? Aren't you just stationed near the defensive line? Why are you chasing after this monster? The man was startled for a moment, but quickly reacted. He quickly changed his expression and said in a humble and respectful manner, Greetings, Wall Lord. I heard that you have gone out. You may not know this, but our defensive line has been moved to the depths of the Red Wasteland. The outer wasteland has been cleaned up and turned into a hunting area. We have been ordered to clean up the depths of the Red Wasteland and turn it into an outer wasteland. Dean's eyes slightly moved. Orders? Whose orders? Aoli's face slightly changed. He was about to open his mouth when a figure suddenly fell from the sky and appeared in front of him. It was Dana. Come here. Dana looked indifferent as she raised her slender hand. Aoli was startled as he noticed the petite and beautiful girl. He quickly realized that she should be Dean's female companion. He didn't dare to disobey the order. Yes. As he flew closer, Dana's palm quickly pinched his face. One of her fingers turned into a black spike and shot into his forehead. Aoli was about to struggle, but his eyes became dull and lifeless. After a few minutes, he slowly recovered, but his eyes were blank. So that's how it is. Dana thoughtfully raised her altitude and said to Dean, Let's go. Dean slightly wryly smiled. Reading memories was good. It was reliable and fast. Whoosh! Dana's figure was like the wind as she flew forward. Dean quickly arrived in front of the three people in the distance. But Dana didn't slow down. She completely ignored the three people and flew straight towards them. The three people had sent Aoli to inquire about the situation. They were ready to escape when they saw Dana and Dean rushing towards them. But it seemed that the other party didn't care about them at all. They turned around and saw that Dean and Dana's figures had turned into black spots and were about to disappear from their sight. After a moment, Aoli returned in front of the three people. Who was that? The three people quickly asked. Aoli smiled. You may not believe it, but it's the rebellious Wall Lord of the Outer Wall. I didn't expect that I would bow down to a pariah one day. It's him? The three people were surprised. They had heard of Dean's legendary deeds. He was a pariah who climbed to the highest position in the inner wall. He was superior to many noble nobles and tycoons. Even the ancient hunter families had to look up to him. I heard that he left the giant wall and went to the kingdom of God with the strength of a sovereign level. How could he come back so soon? Doesn't it take years to go back and forth to the kingdom of God? His speed is so fast. He shouldn't be a sovereign level expert, right? The three people looked at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. If he wasn't a sovereign, then he must be an abyss expert. Just now, the person he was hugging seemed to be our former saint, Her Highness Aisha. One of them asked in puzzlement. It's her. I used the eagle's eye to see her. But it seems that she was infected and turned into an undead. Her eyeballs were completely black. Another graceful woman sighed. I don't know what kind of storm will be set off in the giant wall if he comes back at this time. I guess another massacre will begin. Aoli muttered to himself. What did you see? What's the situation inside the giant wall? Dean asked Dana. Dana replied. The Amelia tribe that you met has migrated to the God's Wall. Moreover, they have taken control of the God's Wall. Dean wasn't too surprised. The Amelia tribe had run out of food and ammunition at that time. They had to find a new shelter or they would slowly decline. Although the map he gave them wasn't trusted, but as long as there was a trace of possibility, he would try. It would be difficult for the Amelia tribe to resist. After all, the high-end forces within the giant wall had suffered a great loss after the attack of the invaders. They didn't have the same level of fighting strength as the Dragon Mother. You are lucky. Dana glanced at Dean, who was gradually catching up. The Wall Lord Aristotle came back not long after you left. Your so-called friends are wanted. I don't know if they are alive or dead. Fortunately, Amelie's tribe has migrated over and avenged you. Dean was startled. Was he killed? I don't know if he is alive or not. There is no news of him being beheaded. He should be captured and imprisoned. Dana smiled. You don't seem to be worried about your friends. Dean calmly said, There's nothing to worry about. I have made preparations before I left and told them that life and death are up to fate. Whether they can survive or not depends on their own luck and wisdom. You are open-minded. Dana slightly curled her lips. I've seen a lot of things. Naturally, I will be open-minded. Dean shrugged. That's not necessarily the case. The more I see, the more I care about it. It's just like how people tend to be misophobic after seeing too many dirty things. After hearing too many ghost stories, people tend to be afraid and become timid, Dana said calmly. Dean didn't refute. Suddenly his mind turned. Ghost stories? Whoosh. It didn't take long for them to leave the red wasteland and come to the outer edge. From time to time, they saw monsters running on the ground or gnawing their prey. They also saw teams of pioneers surrounding the monsters. Dean found that the number of pioneers here was obviously more than when he left. Is this the effect of Amelie Tribe's management? What are you going to do after finding the super chip? Take control of the giant wall? Dean asked. Dana indifferently said, It's just a small giant wall. If it's a kingdom of God, I can reluctantly accept it. Dean was speechless. Dana's tone was too big. But I would like to see the spaceship of Amelie Tribe. We can use it as our laboratory. Dana said with a little interest. Dean shrugged his shoulders, indicating that he was at ease. The situation inside the giant wall had been settled as they talked while flying. Not long after, the giant wall of Sylvia slowly appeared in front of the two people's line of sight. The towering giant wall still looked shocking, making people marvel at this magnificent project. They flew over the giant wall and saw soldiers patrolling on the giant wall. Whoosh! A signal flare suddenly ejected into the air. Apparently, the soldiers on the giant wall also saw Dean and Dana. When the two flew to less than 300 meters away from each other, a loud voice came from the giant wall. Stop! Dana didn't slow down, but accelerated. The soldiers on the giant wall suddenly changed from alert to defensive formation. More than a dozen soldiers pulled out a bright silver long-barrel gun and aimed at Dana. Whoosh! The bullet was faster than a rifle bullet. It reached 5 times the speed of sound. Dana slightly tilted her head. The bullet passed by her neck. It wasn't a thrill for her, but there was no need to deliberately avoid it. Her figure was like a phantom butterfly. There seemed to be 8 or 9 Danas in the air. They quickly approached the giant wall. The bullets passed like streamers. None of them hit. When Dana got close, the soldiers quickly abandoned their guns and pulled out their swords. Puff! Dana's body was burning with flames. The flames suddenly spread like a ring of fire. The surrounding soldiers were swept by the ring of fire as soon as they entered the demonic body. Their bodies were suddenly cut off. The flesh and blood of the wounds were burned by the flames. Dean flew over and looked at the dead soldiers on the ground. From the carvings on the armor, he could tell that they were from the Wing family. This gun, Dean picked up a gun. He found that the structure of the gun was much better than the simple guns he made in the giant wall. It was better than the old arrow rifles. Dana continued to fly forward. She didn't care about the dozen people she killed. After entering the giant wall, Dean saw the outer wall area. There was no change. The side wall still firmly blocked the inner wall and the outer wall. It divided status and wealth. Dana's figure flew over the outer wall area and the side wall. The soldiers stationed on the side wall saw the two people passing through the sky. They immediately sent a signal, but they turned a blind eye to it. Soon they sent another signal with a longer curve. After entering the inner wall area, Dana flew to a secluded place in the suburbs. There was a waterfall. There were no villages or towns nearby. It was all plains with few weeds. It wasn't suitable for monsters to hide and hide. Dana flew into the waterfall. It didn't take long for her to return with a small copper box in her hand. Dean's face changed slightly, but he was silent. Dana opened the box and took out a small box. It was similar to a diamond ring box. There was a password on it. After she dialed the password, the small box opened. There was a chip inside. It's a good place to hide it. Dana praised. Dean's mouth slightly moved, but he didn't speak. Let's go and find the palace. Dana smiled. She was in a good mood. Although she knew the location of the storage of the super chip from Dean's memory, it had been so long. Who knew if it was lost or not? Dean silently followed. After a while, The two flew over the Earl's cities and came to King's City. At this moment, King's City was already armed to the teeth. It was daytime when there was a lot of people, but the city gates were tightly shut. Even the drawbridge had been lifted. Dark shadows swayed in the moat. They were bloodthirsty monsters. It seems that they are ready to welcome us, Dana said with a smile. Her body was burning with flames. She flew straight to the city gate. Whoosh! Immediately, cannonballs were ejected from the city. Without any shouting, they started the fight directly. Dana looked at the black cannonball flying over. Her eyes flashed. She converged the flame between her palms and stretched out her slender white hand. Facing the fierce cannonball, she gently caught it. At the same time, she rotated her body and drove the cannonball to make an arc. Then she threw it backhand. The cannonball hit the tower and exploded. Dean sighed in his heart when he saw that her soft hand had reached perfection. He followed far behind and didn't make a move. He slowly thought about other things. He didn't have much time. He had to think about it before the next memory was read. Dana didn't plan to let Dean make a move. For her, these attacks were lighter than an itch. She could easily resolve them. She didn't stop flying forward. Along the way, there were cannonballs and pioneers who could fly. Chapter 991. Inside the palace, dozens of figures dressed in strange clothes stood at the bottom of the stairs, each emitting a powerful aura. They looked up at the figure in front of the throne. It was a petite girl, with golden hair like a waterfall and a pair of beautiful golden eyes. They were like a lake, pure without any impurities, but with a noble aura that could not be looked at directly. This girl stood in front of the throne, and on the throne sat a benevolent-looking old woman. She held a golden scepter in her hand and wore a crown. She was graceful and beautiful. The wall guard just sent a message. There are intruders outside the palace. Everyone who is willing to lead the army. The girl looked around, her eyes calm, her small body without a hint of fear. Reported to the goddess, "I am willing to go." Someone immediately said. As soon as he said this, another tall and strong man said, reporting to the goddess, "The Western City Guard Days has been sacrificed. The enemy is definitely not an ordinary pioneer. It should be a ruler. Let me go. I will go too. The two of us will have a better chance." Another girl in black tights said. She had 2 daggers on her waist, and it was obvious she was good at speed and assassination. "I will go too. I am willing to serve," the other said. Seeing everyone so enthusiastic, the girl nodded slightly. "Everyone, no need to fight. Pooty is right. The enemy is likely to be a ruler. Everyone else, follow me. Pooty, Sengsi, you two lead the army. Try not to injure the civilians." "Yes," the strong man and the girl in black tights said at the same time. The two left quickly. At this time, a servant in golden armor ran over. His body was engraved with strange patterns. He was a desolate guard. He said to the girl, reporting to the goddess, "The heavenly eye has been activated and locked onto the enemy. Is that so? Switch the image." The girl ordered. In the sky above the palace, a light screen was projected, floating in mid-air. There was no physical screen, but the light screen showed a clear image. At this moment, 3 figures were flying in mid-air. There were constantly cannonballs being shot, but they were gently held back by a petite girl who looked no more than 17 or 18 years old. She did not break the balance of the cannonballs and turned to throw them at a distant building. Boom! The ground exploded, raising a cloud of dust. Splashing wooden boards appeared at the edge of the image. Although there was no sound, it was not hard to see how tragic the scene was. Whoosh! 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 More than a dozen figures flew over from the ground and transformed into demonic bodies. They turned into half-human, half-demon monsters and roared as they pounced at the girl. The young girl's body suddenly burst into flames, and the flames shot out like finger-long sparks as fast as light arrows. The warriors who charged forward were instantly pierced through, unable to resist at all. "Impossible. You kill them without doing anything." These are all from the Green Desolate Squadron, right? Why are they so weak? Seeing the scene in the video, everyone in the hall sucked in a breath of cold air. Everyone's faces were filled with shock. Those who had requested to go out to battle earlier were now filled with fear. If the goddess had allowed them to go out to battle, they would most likely have died without a doubt. It's him. The old woman on the throne and the young girl standing in front of her looked at the image, but their gazes were attracted by the person behind the young girl. They were somewhat astonished. They didn't expect that he was still alive after so long. They didn't see Dean after they came to the giant wall. They knew that he was in the wilderness. The wilderness was extremely dangerous. Even if he was a master, he couldn't stay for a long time. But after so long, not only was Dean alive, but he also came back. In addition to them, there were two inconspicuous figures in the hall. They were also shocked and surprised. It's Dean. He's back. Their eyes were full of excitement as they clenched their fists. At this time, the young girl in the video was moving forward. There were arrows, bullets, cannonballs, and other long-range attacks along the way. However, all of them were dodged or caught without causing any damage. In less than a few minutes, a figure suddenly flew out from the screen, rushing out like a cannonball. The two wings on his back were like giant palms, covered with blood vessels and protruding meridians. It was the burly man Pooty who had left the hall earlier. They have gone. Come on, Pooty. Seeing Pooty arrive, everyone in the palace breathed a sigh of relief, but they were still a little nervous. Judging from the fiery girl's previous moves, she was undoubtedly a ruler, and could even be considered an extremely powerful existence among rulers. Pooty and Sun Shi alone might not be a match for her, but they could at least delay her. Pooty had already rushed in front of the young girl while everyone was thinking about it. Whoosh! Pooty's strange wings suddenly clenched. They were like two huge fists as they fiercely smashed towards the young girl. Bang! Pooty's body froze. He used all his strength to stop his body from tilting. Then, everyone saw the flames on the flaming girl's arm recede. She raised her slender white hand and pressed it on Pooty's gigantic wings. In the next moment, flames emerged from her fingertips, which were as tender as a spring onion, and spread rapidly. Whoosh! In just a moment, the flame climbed all over Pooty's body. From the video, everyone could see Pooty's screams. His face was full of pain as his body quickly fell. At the same time he fell, a black light suddenly shot out from the building below. It was as fast as lightning and instantly shot towards the young girl's back, revealing a figure. It was Sun Shi who had come with them. At this moment, she had a black tail on her back. Her whole body was covered in fine black fur, and there was a small horn on her head. Her figure was still beautiful and curvaceous. Everyone could see her flat stomach and full breasts. Her claws with long fingernails were tightly holding two black daggers. When she got close to the young girl's back, her body suddenly spun, and the daggers danced in a whirlwind. Spiral stab. This was Sun Shi's best combat technique. Bang! A ball of flame suddenly shot out from the young girl's back. It instantly enveloped the black spiral blade storm and sent her flying. She fell in an arc far away, her body burning like a meteor. Everyone in the hall took a deep breath. Everyone's eyes were wide open, and their faces were full of disbelief. In just one move, two dominators were actually defeated. They are from the Abyss. After a short silence, a voice full of shock said. Everyone immediately regained their senses. Without a doubt, this kind of strength was definitely from the Abyss. Goddess, I request to activate the Divine Light Wave. Goddess, only the Divine Light Wave can kill them. Someone immediately shouted to the goddess on the stairs, his eyes filled with urgency. In fact, there was no need for them to request. The young girl had already realized the seriousness of the problem when Pooty was defeated. She had already passed the order to the golden-armored Desolate Guard, who had already brought her order to the Wilderness God Hall at the back. Buzz. The entire hall was slightly buzzing. Everyone felt a tremor under their feet, as if there was a slight earthquake. Feeling this familiar tremor, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They secretly admired the goddess's quick reaction. So, the goddess leaped up from the stairs and flew out of the hall. Everyone followed closely behind and walked out in a line. In front of the palace, there were 1,000 steps. It was majestic, and on the plaza beside the steps, there were 2 statues of origami. They were more than 100 meters tall. The face of the origami was not Sylvia, but the origami that they worshipped, the one in the Earth Dragon Cave. At this moment, beside the 2 origami statues, the floor was raised. The floor was actually made of metal, supported by a half-meter thick steel frame. 2 cannons slowly rose from the ground, looking like ancient chariots. Below them was a base that was more than 10 meters long and 4 to 5 meters tall. On top of it, there was a bright silver cannon barrel that was more than 20 meters long, reflecting a dazzling rainbow halo under the sunlight. "Charge!" The goddess's eyes were filled with majesty as she said in a deep voice. Below the cannon barrel, there were 2 warriors wearing silver armor with strange patterns engraved on their bodies. Hearing the goddess's order, they immediately grabbed the whistle in front of their chest and blew it. Very quickly, there was a glass-like transparent area behind the cannon barrel. Obvious light was gathering, gradually filling up the transparent area. Lock the target, fall down a dozen, and prepare to fire, the goddess said in a low voice. After that, Dean's face flashed in her mind. She silently said in her heart, "I'm sorry. You shouldn't have been so overbearing. I'm not ungrateful." So, Dana moved forward, killing all the enemies along the way. Looking at the palace that was getting closer and closer, her expression was calm. There was no joy nor sorrow in her expression. Dean followed closely. Looking at the army that was rushing along the way, he sighed slightly. Suddenly, he felt something in his heart and looked up to the front. At the same time, Dana seemed to feel something as well. After breaking the neck of a warrior that was rushing toward her, she looked up to the front at the distant, bustling place. Dana slightly frowned. Suddenly, she had an inexplicable feeling of uneasiness and trepidation. It was as if something terrible was about to appear. Her premonition had always been accurate, but she was a little puzzled. What could the Amelie tribe have that could threaten her? She suddenly felt a bit of regret. The 2 sovereigns she had killed earlier had very high statuses here, and she had not read their memories. Otherwise, she would definitely have found out more. She put away the idea of a strong attack. She wondered if she should take a detour and capture a few rulers to investigate before attacking. She didn't want to fail because of carelessness. While she was thinking, suddenly, a strong chill surged, causing the hair on her body to stand up. A terrifying feeling of danger instantly enveloped her body, and even her scalp felt a little numb. What was that? She was shocked and a little scared at the same time. So, in her line of sight, a dazzling light suddenly appeared, like a white No! Her pupils contracted, and she wanted to turn her body to avoid it, but the white light arrived in an instant. By the time she saw it, it had already arrived. A sharp pain came from her chest. It was hot and cold at the same time, as if she could feel a cold wind passing through her chest. The white light still remained on her retina, but the attack was over. She looked down in a daze. She could see the buildings on the ground behind her through her chest. Her chest had been completely penetrated. This is impossible. Her body fell quickly. Dean also fell with Dana. His left arm was missing, and there was a hole in his left wing. He had sensed the danger in advance, guessed some things, and reacted in time. Otherwise, it wouldn't be his left arm that was missing, but his head. Laser cannon. No, it's not an ordinary laser cannon. Such a range. Dean's mind was occupied by pain and shock. Looking at Dana, whose chest had been pierced, his mind suddenly heated up, and his heart was excited. He didn't even care about the pain. One dead. Haha, who cares about the abyss? It's nothing in front of the divine light. Back then, the guy called Aristotle was scared to tears by our divine light waves. You think it's the abyss you dare to invade casually? You're courting death. On the steps of the palace, everyone looked at the image projected outside the steps and cheered excitedly. Looking at Dean, who fell with her, the goddess took a deep breath and ordered, "Charge, prepare the second shot, 10 seconds countdown." The silver-armored warrior under the base of the battery immediately whistled. Soon, the second cannonball was charged. At this time, the scene of Dean and Dana falling appeared on the projection. Dean quickly crawled with one arm, and his whole body was demonized. Soon, he dug a hole in the ground and used several sharp-blade limbs to gently roll Aisha next to him and drilled in. On the other side, Dana, because of the force of the fall, smashed a deep pit in the ground and raised a lot of dust. For a while, no one could see the body clearly. So fast. Unfortunately, our divine light has a life-tracking device. Haha, you were arrogant before, but now you're running away like a dog. This time, we've avenged Pooty and Senxi. Unfortunately, we didn't know that these two bastards were Abyss, and let them die in vain. Amidst the excited shouts of the crowd, the second divine light cut through the sky. In the underground, Dean's scalp suddenly tingled, and his whole body was covered with goosebumps. Without thinking, he quickly broke through the ground above his head. Bang! When his upper body had just drilled out of the ground, the only remaining leg was suddenly pierced by the beam of light, and there was nothing below the knee. Dean groaned in pain and fell to the ground. His forehead was full of cold sweat, and the excitement in his heart was gone. He didn't expect such a terrible attack to have a second one, and then a fourth one. Was he going to be killed as soon as he was free? Dean's heart was filled with grief and indignation. He looked at Aisha, who was curled up by the sharp blade. Because of her excessive movements, the blade tightened and cut a few scratches on her body. The strange blade was too sharp and wasn't meant to be used for protection. Dean was sad to see that she was hurt because of him. He clenched his teeth and suddenly hugged her and kissed her deeply on the forehead. Live, even in such a posture, Dean looked at her, and the grief in his eyes was gone, leaving only gentleness and a touch of sadness. The next moment, he pushed her out, and at the same time pulled out the golden bell from his waist and shook a series of special rhythmic bells for 5 seconds. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.